Hello there. Hello. Arr! Arr, ahoy, matey. We are here to do bad pirate voices. Oh, yes. Lots of bad pirate voices today. I, as always, think of Roy Dotrice, rest in peace, and his Davos Seaworth voice. I think that's the pirate voice that I'm going for. Or storms. All the pirates. That's how many we're talking about. All the pirates. Because I have Sean with me, and Sean is dressed as a pirate, as you can see. Oh, that's awkward. Okay, this is what I meant to do. Hey there, Johnny Depp / Here with a Thousand Voices guy. How's it going? This was your idea, so it surprises me not that you turn out to be a pirate enthusiast. I just broke out my normal Vikings crap that I always wear. I've got a Vikings t-shirt and a Vikings jersey. If you talk Ironborn, that's what I got pretty much. But you, sir, have brought something extra. And this was Sean's idea. Sean from Hero with a Thousand Voices. His channel is linked in the description. Make sure you're subscribed. Of course, you're subscribed to my channel. Double check that real quick. And yeah, this was your idea, Sean. It was a good idea. As soon as it hit my eardrums, I was like, oh, Pirates Lore Summit. Yes, the people will like it. So, what was the impetus? Are you just a pirate lover, or what's going on?
It's a lot of things. I'm definitely a pirate lover, which is weird considering I'm a terrible swimmer and can barely float in water. Yeah, I just did a Treasure Island video on my Patreon. I was really examining, pop culture connotations of pirates and why we tend to focus on one specific era of piracy. And, because George and in pop culture in general are not big on, Captain Phillips piracy. We're big on Johnny Depp piracy. So, George is also big into piracy. He's littered them all across his series. He's basically obsessed with it. He had a great time with it, and we're going to talk about all of them.
It's amazing how many of George's passions come through in Ice and Fire. He moonlights as a horror writer. There's a fair amount of mystery. Obviously, he's influenced by a certain brand of 60s and 70s era classic sci-fi, whose themes he adapts into his fantasy world and all these different things. He's a fan of medieval history and Zoroastrianism and Norse mythology and Marvel comics and pirates, because there's a lot of pirates. Let me just click on the outline of this thing. Oh, I'm in view mode. I can't. Never mind. There's a lot. We're going to go through them all is the point. And there's many different kinds of pirates. More independent, state-sponsored pirates. What's up, Steve the Green Hand? Starting it off right. I expected y'all to be fired up for this. So I want to pose a question to you, Sean, and to the chat. What is it exactly about pirates that are so fun and interesting? What is it? Why do you love pirates, Sean? And chat, let me get some answers and I'll read them out here.
Well, I would say that the starting point is that basically somebody wrote a really good book about pirates. There have been a ton of books about pirates, Robinson Crusoe and stuff, but basically Treasure Island was extraordinarily well written by somebody with a background kind of similar to George's, where he had a background in horror. It's the same person who wrote Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And so he was able to keep tension throughout an entire book because of the principles he learned writing horror. And it was just an extraordinarily well-written book that captured people's imaginations. He was a huge influence on J.M. Barrie writing Captain Hook. They kept a correspondence their whole life, those two authors. So Robert Louis Stevenson basically created the archetype of the pirate we see now. It was further affected when Disney did an adaptation in 1950, because the actor who played Long John Silver was charismatic, and it's basically the sound that we associate with a pirate, like a deep, really throaty, kind of brutal sounding with all of the affectations he provided. That's basically why we think of pirates the way we do. and Pirates of the Caribbean was basically based on that because Walt Disney was a huge fan. So it all starts with Treasure Island, and George himself is also a huge fan. He's littered the series with a bunch of Treasure Island references. But something that you said is that we've got like kind of a variety in pirates. You were talking about like state sponsored piracy,
Mm-hmm.
and that's real world stuff because, if you ask the English, Captain Cook's a hero. If you ask the Spanish, he's a pirate.
So
So
it's part of that ambiguity is what's interesting about them. Then they're sort of living on the edge of law and society. They have got a code, not what one would call laws, but there are codes of conduct. I think that's definitely part of the allure. Let me grab some of these from the chat here. I see some good things coming across. I love pirates because booty, the lack of rules, and basically you can create your own power. That's the thing I was zeroing in on. Anarchy is fun and interesting. Ordered, structured society, while safe and predictable, is safe and predictable and boring. So, yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. The thought that your entire world is on the boat with your group of cohorts. Yeah, as sci-fi novels that are taking place entirely on a spaceship have the same sort of claustrophobic interpersonal dynamics, which I think are pretty interesting. That's a good one. Let's see. Literary. Okay, that's different. Let's see. Rebellious bad boy thing. The defiance of unfair laws. Taking control of your own destiny, says Orange Tabby. No kings, no masters. The Jolly Roger is flying in the chat. Let's see.
well,
I
that's
was born in a city founded by corsairs and sailors, raised somewhere called Silverport. My dad dove wrecks, and I have a doubloon. What's that?
it's an old golden coin, basically. You would find them in a lot of wrecks, and yeah, no, that's a tough find because basically pirates already got all the doubloons in
He
all
was
the
a
wrecks. So
libertarian adventurer's
it's
paradise.
panic.
I'd say it's, oh boy, here we go. More like an anarchist collective, but I'm not sure. I haven't thought that out. In any case, yeah, the point is, it's like I said, on the edge of organized society. There is structure, there is a code, but it's definitely off the map. Rebels and rejects, crippled bastards and broken things, as George says. People like to romanticize both the ocean and banditry. That's true. The idea of the wild unknown, freedom of the wild horizon. Tim Curry is the best Long John Silver.
Fact. That is unarguable fact. In fact, Muppet Treasure Island is by far the best treasure island, and I will be taking no notes.
The opinions are flying already. One of the funny things about pirates is all the histories are littered with falsehoods and fiction, a lot of myths and maesters making things up. Yeah, well, definitely, because there's always, most of the records of what they do is going to be, written down by organized society who don't think too highly of the pirates. And let's be honest, the pirates, they stole from people and stuff and lived outside the law. And yeah, I've watched a couple, there's good documentaries about, the actual Pirates of the Caribbean and all that. It's very interesting to get into. I was mostly just wanting to key in on what it is about pirates that make them so interesting. So yeah, they're colorful, the speech, I think a lot of it is textural. You've got the sound of the sea, the rocking of the boat, the creak of the boat and the lines. Like anything on a boat is very textural. We would call it ASMR now, but it's just the sounds and the textures of it. It's very enveloping and immersive. It's a completely different environment than being on land, obviously. And then you've got these colorful pirates talking interesting. You never know what's going to happen. Very unpredictable and chaotic. I think that covers most of it.
Well,
And
one
you've got
thing
a
that
Peter
the
Pan video on Patreon also. I love that. Was definitely a formative movie for me. Peter Pan. Watched that a million times as a kid. Yeah.
Well, it's something that you would really like going back as an adult because the things you notice in A Song of Ice and Fire, like the mythical astronomy, are absolutely huge in Peter Pan. Like, second star to the right and straight on till morning. they're following the even star at night. And then, of course, Captain Hook and Peter Pan are morning star, even star reflective figures. It's why we see, Captain Hook trying to imitate Peter in stealing a mother. It's why you see Peter Pan dressing up as a pirate so often, especially in the Hook adaptation. It's why you see in the Hook adaptation that it took him, they had the journey over 3 days for him to become Peter Pan. It's why he was lifted from the sea in a gigantic seashell. He's doing Morningstar stuff the entire time. Oh, you are muted.
So there's like archetypes and stuff happening, is what you're saying.
Oh, absolutely. And we definitely associate Captain Hook with the way he looks in the Disney movie, but he's actually based on Lucifer. He was meant to be, extraordinarily good looking.
Okay.
And there are a lot of Lucifer references, even to the fact that, the word hook comes from the Latin word for harp, like the curve of a harp. So he's like Lucifer being the angel of music and being an angel, and angels play harps. And then, of course, Peter Pan plays either the panpipes or the flute, depending on the adaptation. So he's doing Pan stuff, but he's also, there's a lot of like Hermes mischief in him, but it's all Morningstar, even star. It's why Hook is missing his right hand so that he fights Sinister, and then they are, of course, a reflection of each other. Yeah, there's a lot of
interesting. Okay, well, cool. I promised myself we were going to stick to, and I know I said this before, mostly not going to do symbolism today, just to enjoy the pirates. But that's cool. That is very interesting. We should talk about that sometime. Maybe I'll come on your channel. We can chop it up.
Sounds good. Yeah, the Peter Pan video, like there are a couple things that I definitely missed looking back, like just because I watched Hook at some point afterwards, and I was like, God damn.
Alana Wood really in the chat says, Sean completely changing the ways I see. One of my favorite childhood movies was not on my 2025 bingo card. Well, it is now. Bingo was his
Hook
name.
Is my favorite movie.
And again, Hero with 1,000 Voices. Do subscribe. His link is in the description. It is this time. Last week I said it wasn't. It wasn't. Now it is. So, thank you for joining me last week, by the way, for New Year's Eve. That was fun. And we went to Primus, too, to get in the mood for the pirate stream. We went to Primus on New Year's Eve's Eve, where they played some pirate songs. And we are ready to go. So, when is the Aurane Waters section? It's coming. We're going to talk about all the pirates. So somebody asked, do the wildlings count? Because, they're... So no, landlubber raiders do not count for today. In the spirit of piracy, sure. And we honor their dedication to theft. But yes, it would be, we can't talk really about the Dothraki, they're on the Dothraki Sea. Does that count? No, unfortunately, that's symbolism.
We made a very specific choice to avoid that.
Yes. And then also to clear up some confusion in the chat, I did not switch up my fan loyalty. I've been a Vikings fan since I was a child. I moved to the Bay Area and adopted the 49ers about 20 years ago. I was a Golden State Warriors fan when I was a kid, before I moved to California. So when I moved to California, that was I was already a Warriors fan. It was easy to start rooting for the
TMC,
Niners. Huh? Was that?
The Run TMC.
Oh, absolutely. Chris Webber, Latrell Sprewell, that was kind of when I was watching, like right at the end of TMC, and then with C Webb and Sprewell. Yeah, those were my boys. I used to like, yeah, okay. I had jerseys of both those guys. So look, don't question my loyalty. I don't really even watch football, but I heard the Vikings are, anymore. I used to play fantasy and all that stuff. It got to be too much. So anyway, I heard the Vikings are good. I might watch, but if I watch tonight, we'll surely lose. So I'm not sure. But yes, Chris Carter. I'm old school. Let's talk about Ice and Fire Vikings. A pirate's ice fire me. Sean's punnery there. That's really good stuff, Sean. Well done. Well done. We will start with the Iron Islanders, but so yeah, Iron Islander piracy is unique, isn't it, Sean? It is a cultural tradition. Balon Greyjoy talks about the old ways and all that stuff. So contextualize, if you will, what they're doing.
Well, if you have to place it into a historical perspective, there are obviously a lot of commonalities between them and Vikings, but culturally they seem a lot more similar to the very English vibe that you get from the rest of Westeros. So, to a point, it's the Vikings, but to a point, it is also kind of how the rest of the world viewed England as they became a major naval power.
Hmm. Okay, that's interesting. So, can you expand on that a tiny bit? I hadn't thought about that.
Well, something that we talked about earlier was how Captain Cook is viewed in and outside of England. He was viewed as a pirate because he, would sink Spanish vessels without warning. If he didn't recognize a ship, he would, board it and ask questions later. He came by the pirate reputation honest, but because he did so much good for England, it was, as you said, state sponsored piracy. So basically, there's a lot of state sponsored piracy until more recent history from the Iron Islands. Like their tradition of reaving is their most hallowed cultural tradition. They literally call it the old way. Um,
So
so
Corlys Velaryon, who we'll get to, would have a little bit of crossover with that sort of Captain Cook piracy as well, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, although I would definitely throw some Sinbad the Sailor that way, and just the way that he's spoken about when they mention his 9 great voyages, it's kind of like an Odin bent on
Hmm.
the 7 voyages of Sinbad.
But just as far as that political dynamic, because like the British
Yeah,
Empire didn't have a culture of piracy. That's more like the Vikings, the Ironborn's culture. Like everybody kind of does it, the raiding or whatever. But that, yeah, with Drake and other privateers sponsored by the state, like, yeah, that's we don't see anything exactly like that. But Stannis employs pirates in his navy, so that's pretty close to that, I would say. And okay, so let's stick with the Ironborn. First things first. One of the greatest pirates in Ironborn history, perhaps the greatest, is of course, and I hope Tim is out there somewhere listening on the replay. I don't see him in the chat yet, but Grey Waste Tim, one of his favorite characters, named his cat, his red cat, Dalton, of course, after the Red Kraken. So tell us a little bit about him.
well, he's a very very respected in Ironborn culture, very much hated outside in Greater Westeros. He was known in Westeros because he started raiding the western shores of Westeros during the Dance of the Dragon,
I'm sorry,
doing
can
it
you hold
on
on?
the
I'm being corrected in the chat. I don't when I say the British Empire didn't have a culture of piracy, I mean like most British citizens weren't living like the Ironborn, like fishing and like getting ready to raid and stuff. Of course, yes, piracy was a standard part of the British Empire. I mean like the way
yeah.
that the Ironborn live on islands and have a purely fishing and maritime based culture is more similar, obviously, to Norse Vikings. That is all I meant. Definitely not
Well,
expunging the British Empire of any wrongdoing. So, yeah, okay, because we're on the same page. Go ahead.
and to be clear, both use longships, the Vikings and the Ironborn. It's
Hmm.
not like they are a great naval power in terms of ship to ship combat. They land on the land, do lightning raids, and then leave. So
That's correct. And if I
there
could
is
just
definitely
interject, when they sail the Iron Fleet all the way to Slaver's Bay, that's a unique thing. And they build a new fleet of longships that are twice as big, and they still have to stop a bunch on the way. And they lose a lot of ships because it's like very unprecedented to use longships that way. So go ahead.
right. When we talk about big naval battles in A Song of Ice and Fire, you're talking about Drummonds and repurposed cogs and stuff. Big naval warships. A longship is not going to typically sink a gigantic Drummond. Like those are for raiding on the land and then disappearing quickly. So, and it's very Viking. It's not very British, and I think that's basically the distinction you were trying to make earlier between the British and the Viking piracy. But yeah, back to Dalton Greyjoy. He was kind of given the choice during the Dance of the Dragons. The Greens tried to get him on their side by offering, maybe a marriage and a place in the small council as master of ships, etc. And the Blacks just said, "Hey, go raid, go reave the western coast. We've got their armies occupied. Have fun." And he said, "That's the one I want to do." And so he just really raided the western shores of Westeros, some of the Reach, a lot of the Westerlands. Specifically, he went very, very brutal and scorched earth against Lannisport. He had some pretty rough things to say about the women of the Westerlands.
Yeah, I've got that quote locked and loaded. It occurs to me that perhaps that's what Robb Stark, if he knew his history, that's maybe what he was counting on, because obviously negotiating with the Ironborn is tricky, but he thought he was offering them something they would want. Like, hey, can you go raid, the Lannisters? You guys love doing that. But the thing is, there's also a long history of the Ironborn raiding the coast of the north, all the way up to Bear Island. And in fact, the Ironborn cultural influences on places like Sea Dragon Point and Bear Island is so much that they are, in fact, like hybrid cultures, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but getting back to Dalton, the women of the West prefer men of iron to cowardly lions, it would seem, for they jump into the sea and plead with us to take them. That's what he said after capturing like 100 women, I believe it was. So here's the summary of his deeds. Hang on a second. Let me just hardy har. Harum. One such was Dalton Greyjoy, the wild young son of the heir to Pike. Well, actually, I need to move my thing out of the way just a little bit. There we go. Heir to Pike in the Iron Islands. Of him, Hake, Archmaester Hake, writes, he loved three things: the sea, his sword, and women. A fearless child, headstrong and hot-tempered, he is said to have been rowing at 5 and reaving at 10, sailing with his uncle to the Basilisk Isles to raid the pirate towns for plunder. So that's kind of hardcore. We'll get to the Basilisk Isles, but they're a nest of like more classic, outlaw pirates on a archipelago that's just not really settled, kind of making pirate towns and stuff. And the Iron Islanders occasionally go there just to prove their worth and just kind of F stuff up, I guess.
You got to be a real hardcore pirate to raid other pirates. And in the Basilisk Isles, I mean, basilisks themselves, I believe they say in a World of Ice and Fire that there are wyverns and other just terrible stuff going on, diseases, etc. So it's a really brutal place to go. And it just because reaving was largely discouraged at that point in Westerosi history, after the Targaryens arrived, they were able to, they really started reaving and pillaging wherever they could outside of Westeros. And the Basilisk Isles was one of those places. The other pirates already did the work for them, gathering the treasure there.
That's absolutely insane. Like, I just had to stop and process that. That's crazy. Sailing with his uncle to the Basilisk Isles to raid the pirate towns for plunder. It really sounds more like coming of age, like just proving we're the baddest pirates around. In any case, by the age of 10 and 4, Dalton Greyjoy had sailed as far as Old Giss. So that means Dalton was doing this before he was 14. So he's reaving at 10. It's like a 12-year-old. I mean, he's probably just a cabin boy at that point. Maybe throwing some rocks or something. I don't know. Maybe he's... Anyway, by 14, he sailed as far as Old Giss, fought in a dozen actions, and claimed 4 salt wives.
Yeah, okay. I mean, when I was 14, I was maybe 95 pounds and not quite 5 foot.
I was
I was a
getting good
little
at Street
guy.
Fighter 2 in the arcade. I was like getting my Shenlong motion down.
Yeah,
You know, Hadouken.
this guy got wives already. I wouldn't have known what to do with them, but I'm like a pretty normal sized guy now. But God, what were these people doing at 14?
Ironborn. I mean, it's all, large, tall tales and whatnot, but his men loved him more than can be said of his wives, for he tired of women quickly. And there'll be some uncomfortable subtext here as we read this, obviously. His own love was his blade, a Valyrian steel longsword he had taken off a dead corsair and named Nightfall. In his 15th year, whilst fighting in the Stepstones as a cell sail, he saw his uncle slain and avenged his death, but he took a dozen wounds and emerged from the fight drenched head to heel in blood. From that day forth, men called him the Red Kraken.
Fought in a dozen actions, took a dozen wounds. There's a lot of last hero math with this guy.
Yes, yeah, he's got a Valyrian steel sword, Nightfall, the Red Kraken. Yeah, there might be symbolism here, for
Well,
sure.
and he lost the Valyrian steel sword too when he was murdered. So it was eventually taken up by House Harlaw, which is where we see it in the current story.
Yeah, there's a whole train of thought there for sure, for sure. So Dagon Greyjoy, the last Reaver, named after, no, not named after, named after Dagon, I guess, in a way. Too cold up here for me, said Sir Maynard. If you want to kill is that Maynard Plum?
It sure is, yeah. It
Oh,
was Maynard Plum and not anybody else in disguise.
well, let me just. Too cold up there for me, said Sir Maynard. If you want to kill Krakens, go west. The Lannisters are building ships to strike back at the Iron Men on their home islands. That's how you put an end to Dagon Greyjoy. Fighting him on land is fruitless. He just slips back to sea. You have to beat him on the water. So, yeah,
And
this
he's
is
right.
during the time of Dunk and Egg, right?
Well, and that is how they really conclusively defeated the Iron Islands during the Iron Islands Rebellion in Robert's reign. Defeat them at sea and then raid the islands.
Yes, you're right. You're right. That is what you have to do. And it seems like if you bring your whole navy and you bring the bigger ships and overwhelm them, you can beat the Ironborn. But it has to be like a full Royal Navy with skilled captains, and you got to commit to it. Yeah. So we've seen that. Other because they're kind of pesky otherwise, essentially.
Yeah.
Now the Norse Vikings, they did get caught up at one of the great battles of Constantinople, didn't they?
Their history is weird and fascinating. What we think of Vikings as being, their culture for a long time, but Vikings only really happened after a certain point. Basically, the Christian missionaries came, and that pissed them off so much that they just started raiding, especially churches and stuff like that.
They were mostly trading first, and the trade routes and trade
Right.
sites became places that they raided. Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
So after they kind of got that violent reaction to trying to be converted to Christianity, it was funny because while they were away reaving and raiding, their lands were converted to Christianity behind them. So they came back and they're a Christian nation now. So yeah, but they kind of abandoned that culture. So the Viking era really was not that long, but they were a seafaring people before and after.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely. And just real quick, I think I got a PayPal that I missed a second ago that I wanted. Oh, John Ice Eyes with the gifted memberships. Thanks, John. Appreciate you. I think the Grey King is Gartha Green and R'hllor Ahai's brother. So I think I'm working on that actually, Tiresias. I've got my next produced video will be, well, actually it's going to be an edited and artified version of Aaron got patch-faced. You remember that delightful video and theory from a year and a half ago? I've got that one coming out on a edited re-release this week. And then following week, it'll be Naga's Bones. Getting back to Ironborn videos, because you always need more cowbell and Ironborn videos. And so, yes, Naga's Bones. This is all the Grey King Weirwood stuff, which I actually haven't addressed in any of the Ironborn videos yet.
No.
So that is coming, and I will be talking about Grey King as a Green Seer and all that. So look for that video. Thanks for queuing that up. Are there pirates of the Green Sea? Varamir. Yes, Azor High. Hawk. Not all, but most of the pirates have Azor High symbolism, like the Red Kraken with his Nightfall sword that we just read, okay? Kills a dozen people. Listen, Azor, I don't want to talk about this all day, but yes, if the Weirwood Net is like the sea, Azor High is breaking into the Weirwood Net, so he's very much like a pirate. He's stealing the power of the Weirwood Net, and so many of the pirates are Azor High figures, like Dalton Greyjoy and Daemon Targaryen, and Aurane Waters, who looks like Rhaegar with green eyes. That's like a perfect description of, symbolically of Azor High going into the Green Sea. So yeah, that's the story.
If I may, Jon Snow as well is having a very similar journey where he goes with Corn Halfhand's raiding party. That's also the trip where he kind of awakens his skin changer powers stolen from the Green Sea. They find at the Fist of the First Men, he finds that horn, among other things, and he gives it to his leal elder brother, Samwell Tarly, who is, since they're both brothers of the Night's Watch, he is a brother of sorts. Yeah, and the horn is the sigil of House Goodbrother, the leal elder brother of the Grey King. So there's
I'm gonna have to rein this in, Sean.
No symbolism.
No, that's like ninth level symbolism. A roaring skull to all you scallywags, Martin Crow. That elder brother stuff is really cool. I was just watching back some of that to try to refresh my memory on what I had talked about or what I hadn't. And yeah, the elder brother stuff is pretty crazy. So there's a whole elder brother pattern. You're saying, yeah, that figures.
Oh yeah, and you always find a horn.
Always a horn. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. All right. So here we go. Dagon ruled for 100 years. That's a long time. Raiding the North and Westerlands for decades with impunity, but finally was defeated by, House Targaryen.
Yeah. Well, if you remember, God, which Lovecraft story is that where they're in that sleepy New England town, and there's that guy who has lived impossibly long, and he's making it with fish people, and yeah. There's a definite relation to Lovecraft here. Obviously, Dagon was prominent in Lovecraft's works, even though it was meant to be based on an actual god who's way different from Dagon. He's like a grain and fertility god.
Correct.
Which is interesting because we have the whole "we do not sow" thing of the Greyjoys. So it's a very purposeful inversion, and him living that long is kind of, it's a Grey King thing as well. So just kind of relating those two archetypes to each other.
I got a question via PayPal. I'm not really asking for PayPals too much anymore. It just seems like easier to go through the super chat thing. That is still like if you want to give a one-time donation of a larger size and you want me to get all of it instead of YouTube taking their cut. That's kind of what it was for. I saw somebody asking about that. But the question is, has anyone of Westeros ever thought about resettling the Ironborn on the Stepstones? They might like it since it's near the Storm God's house and they can raid the Three Sisters. No, I don't think anyone has thought of that. And I don't know that you could make the Ironborn do much of anything, let alone like move their entire culture. They'd just be a problem there instead too. I don't think that would be better. But interesting, outside the box thinking there.
It's like when in South Park when they move the homeless people from Colorado to California so that they're someone else's problem.
Yeah, that's what that sounds like exactly.
They would like the capital island of the Stepstones there, Bloodstone, but yeah, I don't see why they'd go to a smaller territory there.
So how did the Targaryens defeat them? Who did that?
Well, the first time it was Aegon the Conqueror. He came in on Balerion, and then he 1v1'd their leader with
No, Dagon. I
Blackfire.
mean Dagon
Oh, Dagon. Let's see.
Greyjoy.
Yeah. Um, my brain is going blank here, but
Yeah, I couldn't remember either who it was. Oakenfist.
Alyn Oakenfist.
That's what.
No, so Alyn Oakenfist was sent by Unwin Peak to go defeat Dalton Greyjoy, but right before he got there, Dalton Greyjoy got murdered, and the Greyjoy fleet just dispersed. So,
By one of his women, right?
right, her name was Tess.
And then she killed herself and jumped into the sea, right?
Right, right. So Dagon Greyjoy.
Sounds like some
That
Nissa
was
stuff for those who like symbolism. Go ahead.
yeah, Dagon Greyjoy was a lot closer to modern times. Um, like one of the what's it, Dagmar Cleftjaw, actually reaved with under Dagon Greyjoy for a while, I think.
Oh,
But yeah, so he wasn't that long ago, but it is a measuring stick to show how old Dagmar Cleftjaw is and how long he's been reaving. Um, yeah, if someone in the chat can kind of jog our memory here, how Dagon got defeated.
yeah, we'll circle back to it. We'll see.
Yeah.
Balon Greyjoy. It's always good to keep up on what tactics work in case they show up.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Balon Greyjoy. It would have been Egg, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it have been around the time that he was king?
So yeah, that was because remember it was Sir Maynard who was saying that's how you defeat Dagon Greyjoy.
Yeah, it would have been King Egg. I wonder who we sent out there to do it though, or maybe even during Aerys' reign. Okay,
Oh
well,
yeah,
let's not
Ares
get lost
first
on that.
thing. Okay.
Balon Greyjoy. It says that Dagon died the same year as Summerhall.
Interesting.
So Balon, Theon's very lousy father, he is another historic reaver who's got a, larger than life story. They hadn't been reaving outside the Iron Islands since Dagon Greyjoy, but Balon, he revived the old ways, of course, and he reversed his father's reforms. He was reaving outside of Westeros to sort of train and get good at stuff. And then, of course, he rebelled against Robert Baratheon. And go ahead and read that quote for us. Let me scroll up. Yeah.
9 sons had been born from the loins of Quelon Greyjoy, but only 4 had lived to manhood. That was the way of this cold world, where men fished the sea and dug in the ground and died, whilst women brought forth short-lived children from beds of blood and pain. Euron had been the last and least of the 4 Krakens, Balon the oldest, eldest, and boldest, a fierce and fearless boy who lived only to restore the Ironborn to their ancient glory. At 10, he scaled the flint cliffs to the Blind Lord's haunted tower. At 13, he could run a longship's oars and dance the finger dance as well as any man in the Isles. At 15, he had sailed with Dagmar Cleftjaw to the Stepstones and spent a summer reaving. He slew his first man there and took his first 2 salt wives. At 17, Balon captained his own ship. He was all that an elder brother ought to be, though he had never shown Euron aught but scorn. You are muted. Muted.
Oh, sorry. I was
All
just
good.
saying that's pretty much that. We didn't need the rest of this here. Although it's basically just Balon, dressing
Showing his
down
personality.
Theon. It's very depressing. I'm sorry. It's one of the roughest scenes in the story. As lousy as Theon is, you can't help but feel bad for him in this scene. I mean, this is brutal.
Oh, he is awful, but you kind of look at what he went through and how he's jacked around it. He comes by it honest.
It's not even that you feel bad for Theon, you just feel the awfulness of Balon's treatment. I'll say that. Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I mean to say. So Victarion, okay, well, what do we want to say about these three Reavers? They're basically creating the Ironborn archetype, right? They are epitomizing it. They are setting a standard for people to live up to. And so in our modern story, we get someone like Theon, who is Dagmar Cleftjaw is a perfect person to bring up, okay? We see Balon and Victarion, these great reavers that everyone respects, and Dagmar Cleftjaw he is like the older generation that's still around. And so he's respected even by those as like, oh, an old timer. He raided with Dagon Greyjoy. And so Theon is like, that's who Theon is with when he's out trying to prove himself and doing foolish stuff. And so this is what world building is. It's so that in these pivotal moments in the story, we can appreciate the weight of the cultural expectations and the pressure that Theon is trying to live up to. That's pressing down on his shoulders. And this is it. It's these here. His father was one of these legendary reavers.
Yeah, they're kind of playing the hits with almost a parody on the hero's journey here. At 10, he scaled the flint cliffs to the blind lord's haunted tower. Like that just sounds like it's taken out of a fantasy story where he is the hero. The blind lord's haunted tower, like wow, that's like some straight dark lord stuff. He's, defeating him. And he has, Dagmar Cleftjaw at 15. He sails with Dagmar Cleftjaw, almost like this is his kind of mentor slash the wizard training him, and then Theon kind of gets the same treatment, but it's all just kind of corrupted, and that's a big theme with the Iron Islands, is that this is kind of just a corrupted, decayed culture. Muted.
I've done like 5 of these so far. I will try to try to be more mindful. Yes, they really are backwards, as I like to say in my Ironborn videos. They are fun to make fun of. Hardy har har, yo ho. So then we've got Victarion. Victarion, he is bigger, dumber, and far entertaining, you have written. That is pretty much the case. We are in his monologue as he tries to think stuff through, and it's like a child playing with blocks. Like, I know one block goes in the hole somehow. I just can't quite. Is it the round one or the square one? I've got 2
Yeah.
blocks. 2 gods. I'm stronger now. Yeah, he's a mess. But he, of course, is a, a vicious warrior. You know that scene where he jumps down onto the ship of the Lord. Oh gosh, I forget the name of the house. It's Sir something, not Serwyn, but
In the Shield Islands.
yeah, and it's yeah. He leaps onto the ship that they're raiding in full mail and takes on like 12 people. And the whole thing about wearing steel plate at sea is that if you fall into the water, you drown. You've got no hope of survival. So it's a very high risk strategy. But you can see Victarion, he jumps down amidst all these people and he's just taking blows left and right off of his armor and then just brutalizing people. So it's a hardcore fighting style.
It is a throwback to, if you remember in Ironborn history, there's that one Somebody the Black, where he
Balon
had
Blackskin.
Balon Blackskin, And since Victarion is basically playing off the same Balon archetype, it makes sense. He had this black armor that nothing could pierce. And it's like, yeah, this guy's got armor and nobody else does. And maybe that guy was the first guy with steel or iron armor, black iron armor, whatever. And yeah, it would seem like, some immortal magic armor if he's the first one who's got it, or if he's the only one who's got it. And that's kind of what Victarion is doing when he's the only one with armor, just swinging that giant axe around on a ship with a bunch of people who aren't armored.
Yeah, he's that's a good call out. And that Balon Blackskin legend, I always took that to be a little bit of magic and a little bit of real talk. So like somewhere there would have been the first Ironborn wearing iron plate. Probably not even steel. There would have been black iron, which is even heavier. So it would have been, if you think about the first people getting raided by people in iron armor plate, it would have been one of those hard to understand, stupefying magical technologies kind of a thing. Like, these people in this indestructible black skin, they came and kicked our ass. So, of course, there could be some magical implications too. But definitely, I think it's an account of the first armor. Tiresias, I'm not following your train of comments. I don't know what parallels you're talking about. Victarion gets sacrificed to Euron, and Aeron takes revenge. I don't know what we're talking about. I'm sorry. I'm not really thinking about deep symbolic parallels today, though. I'm really just trying to focus on the story about the pirates. So I don't. Maybe if you leave a comment, I can follow you, or if you leave something in the Discord. But yeah, I'm not sure what we're talking about. So where were we? Okay, fighting Victarion. So Victarion tried to become king at the King's Moots. Very simple pitch. What was his pitch? I'll give you more of what Balon gave you, right?
Yeah, pretty lazy and a pretty spot on that he's gonna follow the same basic archetype that Balon was, a stereotypical reaver, big, dumb, and brutal.
So it says 3 more prizes were taken before Yaros dwindled off their stern. What?
Oh, sorry, I'll just clear my throat.
Okay. A fat galleass fell to the Vole and Grief, and a trading galley to Manfred Merlin of Kite. Their holds were packed with trade goods, wines, silks and spices, rare woods and rare scents, but the ships themselves were the true prize. Later that same day, a fishing catch was taken by 7 skulls and Thrall's Bane. She was a small, slow, dingy thing, hardly worth the effort of boarding. Victarion was displeased to hear that it had taken 2 of his own ships to bring the fishermen to heel. Yet it was from their lips that he heard of the Black Dragon's return. The Silver Queen is gone, the ketch's master told him. She flew away upon her dragon, beyond the Dothraki Sea. Where is this Dothraki Sea? He demanded. I will sail the Iron Fleet across it and find the Queen wherever she may be. The fisherman laughed aloud. That would be a sight worth seeing. The Dothraki Sea is made of grass, fool. He should not have said that. Victarion took him around the throat with his burned hand and lifted him bodily into the air, choke-slamming him like the Undertaker, back against the mast. Oh, I added that, sorry. He squeezed till the Junkishmid's face turned as black as the fingers digging into his flesh. The man kicked and writhed for a while, trying fruitlessly to pry loose the captain's grip. No man calls Victarion Greyjoy a fool and lives to boast of it. When he opened his hand, the man's limp body flopped to the deck.
I'd say this is like the really dumb version of Drogo's speech where he says, I will sail across the poisoned sea and take the Iron Throne and blah, blah, blah. He's threatening to, seat his queen on the Iron Throne. Victarion is trying to grab this queen so that, Euron and she can sit the Iron Throne and rule Westeros. So it's kind of similar, but Victarion's really, really dumb.
So, yeah, Victarion is very strong, and don't call him a fool or he'll get mad. It's just, yeah, he's just a meathead, basically. It's funny because he's trying to like navigate theology, like living theology, new religions and gods are swirling all around him and he just doesn't know what to make of it. So here we go. Euron Greyjoy has been living the pirate's life since he was exiled from the Iron Islands. So how many years has that been? 2 years?
Uh,
Or was
I
it
thought it
more?
was four, but
Four.
either way, he's been, reaving the whole time. He says he went to Valyria. He clearly has gone to some places because he showed up with a full suit of Valyrian steel armor, which is unthinkable.
Right. So we don't know. I think that he has been to Valyria, at least. I mean, he got that armor and the dragon horn from somewhere. If it wasn't Valyria, then it was like a Shy or, I don't know, maybe Karth, but he certainly has the sort of sorceress power that you might need to sail close to Valyria and back. I buy that. Ashai does seem like more the place where you'd be able to buy stuff, like a suit of armor. Like, I don't know that you would just be walking around the ruins and like, oh, there's a dragon horn, there's a suit of armor, like there's power ups everywhere.
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't
it's
know.
like how would you pay for a suit of Valyrian steel armor? And the answer is, well, you either wouldn't, you would get it from Valyria, or you would go where trade is so messed up that you can trade food and water for precious gems in Valyria. I mean, in Ashai, because they don't have potable water or food that they can eat. So you give them, maybe a good haul from somewhere else that can produce food, and you get a Valyrian steel armor. Either way, the point is that he has gone to a lot of places. He's done some weird and mystical magical thing. He's captured warlocks. Like, there's a lot going on with this guy.
So however he's got some pretty cool stuff. We'll say that. And we see him sort of bamboozling and impressing the Ironborn by sort of just breaking all the norms and traditions and being able to sail further than anyone else and bringing back wonders that are more wondrous. He's sort of exciting that Ironborn basic sense of wonder and adventure and ambition, even though it's all done very darkly. He knows this is something that will appeal to the Ironborn. So yeah, Kingsmoot is a great scene. Of course, Euron, we could talk about Euron all day. He's a psychopath. He abused his brothers and killed a couple of them, and he's probably going to kill Damphair. But he basically, yeah, when he was exiled, he just used that as a chance to turn pirate, like rogue pirate. And he seems to have been a pirate that was gunning for magical acquisitions. He captured those warlocks and started drinking their warlock wine. That's where he got his wine, off of a ship with warlocks that he captured. I do think he's using a glass candle. Yeah. And I do think
Uh,
he's Urathon Nightwalker and Karth, of course. I think that's
so he's
almost just
100%
an
using a glass
obvious
candle.
thing. It's got to be the case. Go ahead.
He's 100% using a glass candle because, for one, the glass candle is the nearest parallel we have to Palantir from Lord of the Rings. And Euron is Sauron, who has a Palantir. His sigil is Sauron. His name sounds like Sauron. The whole Kingsmoot thing is kind of like how Sauron turned most of the people of Numenor to his loyalty and created the Black Numenorians, even though it kind of ruined Numenor. He's doing so many things. Remember when he's giving out these gifts and his gifts are poisoned? One of the titles of Sauron was the giver of gifts when he was
Anatar.
pretending to
Yeah.
be
Right.
right, when he was pretending to be an elf and doing the whole thing with the rings. So, and of course, they keep playing with golden rings around people's arms and golden rings whenever they have his
Okay.
horn around, and his horn is banded in circular golden rings. So it's all Sauron stuff, top to bottom, and it just fits really well with this magical pirate thing they've got going on. Because of course, all of those Black Numenorians, or most of them, ended up in Umbar, they're famous for their Corsair pirate ships. So it's very, very much 1-to-1 there.
That's
In
cool.
terms of
Yeah,
personality.
that all fits real nice. I hadn't obviously we've thought about Euron as Sauron before, but mostly as an arch villain, and not necessarily from the pirate angle. So that's interesting. Nicely done there.
Yeah.
So yeah, and all that does point to him having a glass candle, which again, Urathon Nightwalker. It's like it's an Ironborn name, and he's the Night. I mean, it's just so obvious. So yeah, he needed a base of operations. He needed a fake name. That was it. He was hanging out in Karth under the name Urathon Nightwalker when he was in town, and he was just getting really rich and powerful and accruing, yeah, all this stuff that he comes back and impresses the Ironborn with. So that's kind of his deal. The ship, the silence, it's creepy, crewed by mutes, and it's got a mute black marble moon maiden on its prow. It's definitely just loads of symbolism there, but we've talked about that before. We don't need to go into that. And Euron has, yeah, it's got this. We don't even know what the blood eye is. I think I've settled in on it's got to be an oily black stone under the eye patch, because it's called a blood eye or a black eye, and the bloodstone seems to be black. So
Yeah.
what did I say? The oily stone is closely associated. George has taken the idea of bloodstone and crossed it with his oily stone. So a lot of the bloodstone, that's why the bloodstone emperor worshiped the black meteor. That's kind of the thing there. So black blood, I don't want to explain it all. It's complicated, but the point
too
is
much symbolism.
the point is, what was the point? Yeah, I think that he'll have a greasy black stone under that eye patch. Whenever we see it, that'd be dope. I mean, because we've already seen a dragon glass eye, so how can you go harder than that? Oily stone, that's the only way.
Even if he doesn't literally have greasy black stone, I mean, an eye is wet and his eye is black, so it's kind of like a greasy black stone anyway.
I need it to be real, but yes.
I'll let him know.
So yeah, that's a great quote here. Godless? Why, Aeron, I'm the godliest man ever to raise sail. You serve one god, damp hair, but I have served 10,000. From Ib to Ashai, when men see my sails, they pray. Love that sort of twisted theology from Euron. He's like, overall, I am increasing the level of prayer. Wherever I go, people become more devout.
Well, and it again, like, sorry to harp on this, but it's more Sauron stuff. He converted them to the worship of Morgoth in Numenor, and of course, Euron is trying to get a hold of a dragon. Sauron was trying to get a hold of a dragon and create an alliance with Smaug at one point. So and his eye is basically a dragon egg for all intents and purposes. So yeah, like it's just again and again and again where they're playing into the same archetypes. So some of the crossover is either unintentional or, oh, that's fun, that's just a really easy, like, it's already there for me. But yeah, I mean, Sauron the pirate is a lot of fun.
You just spaced out there for like 5 seconds thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm looking off into the great blue yonder.
And then so Euron, obviously, you've got this quote about, these are the last days when the world shall be broken and remade. A new god shall be born from the graves and charnel pits. Yeah, this is Euron talking about himself as a god. What's that have to do with pirates, though? This is just
I don't know.
cool.
I mean, other than like looking at the very Lovecraftian implications of those pirates and I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of the Lovecraft one again. It's again in that sleepy New England town where there are actually pirates beyond the reef and the they're making money off this trade with the or not the old ones basically, but they're pretending that it's from the Caribbean. Yeah. Anyway, it's very Lovecraftian because of course
Innsmouth.
they have their
Oh, you were trying to. I'm sorry.
Shadow over Innsmouth.
I
Yeah.
was overthinking it, trying to come up with what. Okay, yeah, and the chat is right. I shunted, I stinted you on the last. These are the last days when the world shall be broken and remade. A new god shall be born from the graves and charnel pits. There you go. Anyway,
Take him to church.
he's feeling that warlock wine. That's what I think about when I do Euron. I'm just like, yeah, it's coursing through my bloodstream. He's very excited. All right. So Asha. Asha is the coolest Ironborn by far. She captains a ship called the Black Wind. Her crew is fiercely devoted to her, and there's a good quote about this. This is right before the King's Moot, essentially. Queen's Moot, excuse me. By now, her crew would be eating in the hall. Asha knew she ought to join them to speak of this gathering on Old Wick and what it meant for them. Her own men would be solidly behind her, but she would need the rest as well. Her Harlaw cousins, the Volmarks, and the Stone Trees. Those are the ones I must win. Her victory at Deepwood Mott would serve her in good stead once her men began to boast of it, as she knew they would. The crew of her Black Wind took a perverse pride in the deeds of their woman captain. Half of them loved her like a daughter, and the other half wanted to spread her legs. But either sort would die for her. And I for them, she was thinking as she shouldered through the door at the bottom of the steps into the moonlit yard. It's kind of like real talk there, but like...
She is the best of them. She's the one who's actually, because she's a woman and because it's harder, she has had to actually inspire loyalty using a bunch of different tools rather than just, I murder good. Victarion is not a charismatic guy. When he's making his pitch to become king and he says, you'll have more of what you had under Balon. Like, that's, there's a reason he's not king. He probably had the easiest path to becoming king, but when you have negative charisma, you're not going to sell people on it. Asha actually did a good job and had, I think, the second most people behind her becoming queen, despite the fact that she's a woman, and it's never happened in the Iron Islands. And it's because she knows how to basically sell people. Euron has his own, kind of black charisma there and, his sweet, oily voice, and he promised them the world. But it is telling that she was kind of in second place, and had she been born a man, maybe she would have been the king. But yeah, she's inspired a huge amount of loyalty among her people. I'm going to ignore the symbolism of the three houses that
I'm not even going to listen to you talk about ignoring the symbolism. No. I'm going to cut in to say that it's interesting. So there is this democratic strain with pirates because being on a boat is always kind of a democracy at the end of the day, being so far away from safety. Like, it's whatever everyone thinks is smart, it's important to keep track of that. The captain of a pirate ship, or really just any ship that's out on the sea for a long time by itself, like, maintaining the respect of the crew is key. If you're doing things the crew doesn't approve of or doesn't make sense, you're jeopardizing everyone's life, and they're not going to put up with that. So it's the captain of a ship respect is everything. That respect, the experience. And what we see with Asha is that she is very intelligent and creative. And so, for example, she's bold, but not foolish like Theon. So she confronts Theon in Winterfell and immediately is like, you can't hold this place. This is really dumb. You kind of did a good thing if you quit now and leave. But like, if you stay here, you're an idiot. And we see that she was successful in her strategy. She took captives from Deepwood Mott, and then she treated them well and used them as bargaining chips. So like, she's really, really creative. And I would say that, if you what am I saying? If you, looking at the chat, they're distracting me a little bit. We don't get a lot of tales of Asha reaving. It just says, her crew took a perverse pride or whatever. But just judging by the type of person she is, we can assume she was probably pretty creative. Like, her ingenuity probably made the difference a couple of times. Like, she's not just as fierce as the guys, and oh, I'm pulling a knife out of my, shirt or whatever. Like she's thinking. She's a smart one. So I think that's probably a big part of how she earned that respect.
Well, and to further underline what you were saying about, pirates basically being a democracy, having to continuously earn the respect of the crew, etc. If you're a pirate, you're already a criminal. You're going to be hanged by whoever it is, the British Empire, whatever, if you get caught. So mutinying against your pirate captain is just not as unthinkable a thing. Like, you're already a criminal. You're not worried about what might happen if you mutiny, other than, it's the same punishment you'd get. So if at any moment you feel like it's less dangerous to take this captain out, then that's it. Whereas that's not true if you are in a navy and you have this discipline, etc. You get court-martialed and hung.
Well, and also the way a lot of those things are structured is like they're all throwing in together for a percentage of the booty. So like there is a even though obviously like certain people are in charge and stuff, there is a democratic aspect. It's not like you join the Navy and they just tell you what ship to get on and what to do. Like everyone on a pirate raiding mission is kind of joined in together as a collective. That's what it is. Like almost early capitalism, if you will, like the very first what's the word I'm looking for, like before the stock market price. But like the thing that led to the stock market, where like just a group of people sort of throw in together on a joint venture.
Well, and also to kind of put the same point forward is they kind of don't know what they're doing yet with these things like capitalism and democracy, etc. But one thing that kind of stuck with me is this thing that they repeat in the Iron Islands: every man who's a captain is a king on their own ship.
Right. And then when they have the moots, all the kings vote. And that's similar to the Viking tradition of the all thing, where, all the captains vote and stuff. So, there are strains of democracy like substances. Don't ever take anything that I say like that too literally. This is not like political science discussion, just sort of loose ideas and stuff. But so
Fisher Price, my first democracy.
The point I was building to was just saying, like, I guess meritocracy is a big part of it too. Who you were born to doesn't mean that much. Like we see that with Theon. Like he tries to throw his reputation around, doesn't really do much because he hasn't proven himself. Asha, however, has great respect amongst the Ironborn because she has proven herself. That's an element of meritocracy. Okay, so the thing about Asha is that, like, they're sexist, they're patriarchal, they've never had female leaders. However, they also have this idea that, like, if you can prove yourself, then we'll follow you. So Asha is sort of causing this cognitive dissonance for the Ironborn. But it's interesting that so many of them are kind of like, actually, she's competent. She's so competent that I'd vote for her. Because like you said, she got a lot of support at the Kingsmoot. And I always found that to be just one of the most interesting scenes in the book.
Yeah, it's a good example of, watery tart throwing a sword at you being a basis for a system of government.
A minute ago, somebody said that they would, what was it? Something about, I'd throw in for a percentage of your booty. There you go.
Oh, shout out to of yours.
I guess
yours or mine.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know. You got the makeup on. Maybe it's
collective booty.
Maybe we're all in a ship together and things are happening. I'm not sure. It's a shipping joke. See, I'm on the internets. All right. So she tried to become queen. It did not work. She did not get enough support, but she made a good run. And it was interesting to watch. And her speech, this is the highlight of her speech, joint stock companies. Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Peace, land, victory. I'll give you Sea Dragon Point and the stony shore, black earth and tall trees, and stones enough for every younger son to build a hall. We'll have the Northmen too as friends to stand with us against the Iron Throne. Your choice is simple. Crown me for peace and victory, or crown my uncle for more war and more defeat. What will you have, Iron Men? So somebody earlier was saying, oh, what if the Ironborn moved to the Stepstones? Well, Asha is basically saying, hey, Sea Dragon Point's not far. There's hardly anyone living here. And I've worked this thing out with the Deepwood Mott people. And, like, we can just go live there. And they have trees. You guys notice how we're out of trees here on the Iron Islands? Well, like, they have trees there. And we could make more ships and stuff. I'm just saying, it's a pretty good speech.
Yeah, and she pulls out a bunch of acorns when she does it. So she's doing like the whole, we could try to be, oak kings here. We could try to have harvest, and she says, peace, land, victory. She's talking about trees and stuff. It's all very like, we could have summer, but with my uncle you'll have winter. So
you guys notice how we don't grow trees and yet we need them? Yes, exactly. All right. Good stuff. Yeah, Asha, very logical, that Asha. So, in conclusion, the Ironborn are weird Lovecraftian Vikings, and they're essentially their rating is born out of the fact that they are resource poor, and the only way to really get rich is to steal, and they're good at sailing and other people aren't. So it's pretty basic stuff at a certain level, right?
Mm-hmm. And they've lost a lot of that power in more recent times as Westerosi have really, beefed up their navy and learned how to create more complex ships that can fight in the water.
Yeah, it's almost like the argument you hear like at different moments in it, like the Third Reich, for example. I was looking for those other examples too, but like when you get a leader who's like taking over a country that was aggressive a couple decades ago and now they're impoverished. And then a leader comes along that's like, let's go back to the days when we were kicking ass because it's kind of sucked since then, wasn't it? That's basically the argument that he's making. So it's a militarization, a national pride argument. Yeah. And it doesn't go well, really, because essentially the more unified the Seven Kingdoms is, the less effective the Ironborn strategy is. And that's why you see sometimes their raiders that are successful pop up in times when there's a lot of turmoil in the Seven Kingdoms and they're not as unified.
Yeah, that and the people who are reaving are now doing it outside Westeros.
Right. Like Balon did, sailing to the Stepstones and whatnot.
Yeah, all of them, really. All the current Greyjoys, except for Theon, who do the reaving, are doing it, in the Stepstones and the Basilisk Isles, etc.
So, yeah, guys, you need ships. Should have listened to Asha, but we didn't. So let's talk about Velaryons and Targaryens.
Ooh.
And we mentioned Corlys earlier. Explain to the people why Corlys is on this list. He, for the most part, is a noble lord. He's an admiral. I mean, he's got a bunch of ships and he's wealthy. What are you trying to imply here, Sean? I mean, are you saying that Lord Corlys Velaryon, noble Lord Corlys, did not necessarily gain all of those treasures by making clever transactions out there in the world?
I think he took extreme advantage of supply and demand and trading over large distances. We know that, he created new trade routes. He's very much the archetype of like, an explorer for king and country, after, Amerigo Vespucci, again, Captain Cook for the English, where they find new places, they set up settlements, etc. They enable more trade, but outside they're kind of viewed as pirates. And he also participated in a number of wars. He fought against pirates in the Stepstones, but those were really like state-sanctioned pirates by the Triarchy. So if you're the Triarchy, you view Corlys Velaryon as a pirate. And then he's on different sides of the Dance of the Dragons several times. They kind of swap. And so whichever side he's not on, they are pirates essentially enacting an embargo, which is also what Stannis is kind of doing. And we'll get to that later. But yeah, I mean, pirate is always kind of in the eye of the beholder. So if you're not friends with Corlys Velaryon, he's a pirate.
Right. And so essentially what you're doing is backfilling from what we know of historical people that are similar to Corlys.
Yeah.
We don't get the details of all these Corlys missions, but if you look at the people that he's like in history, we should assume that, you know, at times he just killed people and took their stuff, and other times he traded, and there's probably a range of things that happened. So, and other times he maybe got attacked by pirates but won and took all their shit or something like that. So, I mean, you know, it's that's the thing about the open seas, is there's not any witnesses around most of the time. So if a couple of ships run into each other out there, so who knows what's going to happen.
The implication, yeah. But yeah, it's there's also very much the aspect of Sinbad the Sailor, the 7 voyages of Sinbad. They describe it as the 9 voyages of Corlys Velaryon, but there's a reason he used that language specifically. You know, Sinbad is sometimes a, you know, sailor prince, but he's also very often described as a pirate. He kind of, you know, in some of the movies, he dresses more like a pirate. In some of the movies, he dresses more like a noble. But it's either way, you know, it really depends on your point of view and who you are. But he is, you know, sailing the seas, exploring, dealing with all these mythical creatures. And Corlys Velaryon was the first person to get to a lot of these mythical places with mythical magic creatures. Like, he's the first one to get to a shy, if you don't count Alyssa Farman, who didn't really report back. But he's, you know, discovering wyverns, you know, all of these things. And it is, again, always kind of in the eye of the beholder, whether it's you're talking about him being a cook archetype or a Sinbad the Sailor archetype. Oh, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was going to say the chat's raising a good point, which is like, how did the Velaryons get Driftmark?
They won it from the Merlin King.
Right. Yeah. They made a deal with the Merlin King. Okay. But no, how did they really get it? Like, that was an island right off the coast of Westeros. There were probably some Westerosi living there. But at some point, the Velaryons came and took Dragonstone and Claw Isle and Driftmark and set up colonies there. This, again, George doesn't give us the story of this, but we should assume there were people living there, just like there are now. I mean, what? They were totally uninhabited islands. They're perfectly good places to live since then, but there were no people living on them. No. The Velaryons, you know, of various types who came and took these islands, they conquered them and colonized them. So yeah, I mean, how did the Velaryons get set up there to begin with? It's conquest.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, they could have, you know, bought it from whatever noble house had maybe owned it. But the truth is, we don't know. And however it worked out, they took it. And now it is basically a hub of pirate activity, which islands in A Song of Ice and Fire pretty much always are.
Yeah, making the deal with the squishers is just so they don't farm all of your population. Like, you've got to make an arrangement, give them certain people as sacrifices so they'll let you be. That's not how you get the island. That's just how you keep it.
Yeah, it's all very Perseus, Andromeda.
All right, so Corlys, what else do we have to say about him? Yes, he did fight pirates, as we saw in House of the Dragon. He fought the crab feeder, and yeah, it was they went at it for years. That was a vicious war that went on for a long time. It's pretty. I like how they depicted that on the show. That was pretty cool.
The only issue I had with their depiction is they really did not show what an important character Corlys Velaryon was. Like, they did not bring in his history of being the greatest explorer in the history of Westeros, how powerful he had made House Velaryon, like the most powerful house in the realm aside from the Targaryens, how he had created, a new seat at high tide with Spicetown, literally just to absorb all of the trade from everywhere in Planetos. Like, this guy was an absolute living legend, and like the crown was afraid of offending him. It was a huge deal when Viserys chose not to marry his super underage daughter. And I think they kind of portrayed him as getting outmaneuvered politically, as kind of like slow-witted politically, when that's not the sense I get from reading, the A World of Ice and Fire and Blood.
No, you're
You
not
really
wrong.
get, yeah.
They could have.
They had to drum him down because of what a powerful counterbalance he was, basically taking on the entire Greens.
You know what gets me about like the way that TV shows are made is they put so much money into making them. And they give us Corlys's Hall with all of his treasures on the pillars and the murals. There was a story behind all of that. Like when they made those props, they probably thought of stories behind each one. And then like it gets squeezed down to like 30 seconds of time in the actual episode. So he's just him and Viserys are having a conversation. They're walking by this stuff. And like we don't we don't I mean, it was really cool to see Crabfeeder's mask join the collection, but
Mhm.
like, yeah, it's like they had the idea to build up the stature of the sea snake, but then it didn't make it to the actual show. It was just
And
kind
they
of in the
they
background.
barely ever call him the sea snake. Like, they in the text, they rarely refer to him as Corlys Velaryon. Like, they did that in the history book, and then otherwise it's like, but the sea snake was still blocking off all of these lanes, despite the fact that the entire Triarchy was fighting him and the Red Wine Fleet and blah blah blah. But they couldn't match his naval. Like, he was a huge deal, much bigger deal than they portrayed in the show.
So, yeah, read this quote from Gildane here.
Okay. 79 years of age, he had served 4 kings and a queen, sailed to the ends of the earth, raised House Velaryon to unprecedented levels of wealth and power, married a princess who might have been a queen, fathered dragon riders, built towns and fleets, proved his valor in times of war and his wisdom in times of peace. The 7 kingdoms would never see his like again.
Never again. Let me just get my mic back here. Okay. So now, of course, we saw Daemon fighting with Corlys in the Stepstones, and Daemon's mostly doing other stuff besides piracy, but he's sort of moonlit as a pirate, being king of the Stepstones in the Narrow Sea. So how would you describe his reign as king of the Narrow Sea in the context of this discussion about pirates?
Well, he's kind of like a dragon pirate, If Corlys and his fleet are pirates to the Triarchy, like people who are, and they essentially are pirates in this instance because their war against the Triarchy in the Stepstones was not condoned by the Iron Throne. So it was,
Right. And that's kind of the interesting thing about it is it puts it in that gray zone. Yeah.
yeah. So Daemon fighting with this fleet with his dragon, it's kind of like he just has the biggest, baddest ship, and then when they win, he's crowned king of the pirates on Bloodstone Island. By the way, the guy who constantly wants to take his older brother's throne is crowned king on Bloodstone Isle. Sure, why not? And yeah, so he immediately surrenders up that crown to his brother, but the idea was still there that he's fighting pirates from a certain point of view. He is a pirate. um it's a very his long boy dragon there, the bloodworm Caraxes, it's kind of coded as almost like a sea serpent in this instance. So it's all very, it's interestingly done. He's definitely more pirate adjacent than pirate, but he's following an archetype of like prince or king of the narrow sea, or prince or king of the stepstones.
Well, it's kind of similar to Euron, like where Euron gets exiled and he just goes off. He's like, well, I'll just make myself rich and powerful in the meantime. Daemon's kind of doing that with the added twist that like he's accomplishing something he knows will also be useful for the Seven Kingdoms, so that he can potentially use that as a bargaining chip to get himself back into good graces, which he does. And obviously, it aligns with Corlys's interest because it's his trade that's being, mostly cut off by the blockage of the on the stepstones. So yeah, and then as far as the symbolism goes and the sea dragon, this is the whole idea. Like Azor Ahai, the pirate of the Weirwood Net, that he is the sea dragon. That's why the sea dragon has Moon Meteor, Azor Ahai stuff, and Weirwood stuff all wrapped up. Because ultimately this is about the story of Azor Ahai, who is a dragon of the Weirwood Sea. The sea snake, Daemon Targaryen, King of Bloodstone Island, Red Kraken with a Valyrian steel sword. Again, Aurane Waters, who looks like Rhaegar but has green eyes. Euron Crow's Eye, Azor Ahai reborn in some sense, dressing like a Valyrian. There's a reason why all these damn pirates are these dark dragon people. So that's what they are. The Targaryen ships are sea dragons. Check out my Weirwood Compendium episodes, or just wait 2 weeks for my Naga the Sea Dragon video.
Well, and we kind of associate worm, WYRM, and later WORM, meaning similar things. The word WYRM comes from, Proto-Germanic and Norse and etc. And it was basically used by Tolkien to refer to dragons, even though what it meant really was like great serpent. So, they use it to refer to all of the dragons in Norse mythology, Nidhogg from Under the World Tree. So there's definitely an association of that kind of thing going on when you name a dragon bloodworm. There's, whether it's sea serpent, the primordial sea serpent that fights the storm god, or whether it's, more of a classic, dragon. Either way, we're kind of playing into an archetype here.
Well, I will just say that as I was thinking about Naga the Sea Dragon the other day, it occurred to me that I should do an entire lore summit about dragon trees and all the dragon symbolism of the Weirwoods, because there's a lot. So we will table that for now. But yeah, the bloodworm, the blood part of it, Azor Ahai, he's the one that turned the green trees bloody red. Like he made them bleed. He wormed his way in to the Weirwoods and made them bleed. So the bloodworm symbolism for Daemon on Bloodstone it's all very important. But let's see. Speaking of piracy, let's see. This quote is mostly just about Daemon being a powerful piece in the battle. He is the one that Aemon is focused on, of course. But yeah, I think one of the reasons why Daemon is looked at as so dangerous is not just because he has the dragon. It's like the dude just went down and fought a pirate war on a whim and won, and then came back and was like, well, I did that, So it's just like, okay, this guy can handle just about anything that's combat related.
Yeah. One of the few dragons in existence with some serious battle experience. And you look at Vhagar, who has serious battle experience, but her rider doesn't. Aemon has not been in any battles until the Dance of the Dragons. Whereas meanwhile, you have a lot more synergy with Daemon and the Bloodworm, because they've fought together before. And, he's whatever else he is, he's a serious warrior. He's a commander. He knows how to fight. He's tricky. He's cunning. And so Aemon is clocking it correctly when he identifies him as the serious threat. And Aemon has the most powerful weapon in the world at that point, and he's still looking at Daemon as the serious threat.
Yeah, in a way, this whole thing is kind of like if since we've established that George likes pirates and has all these different kinds of pirates in his story, Daemon is kind of like, well, what if you gave a pirate a dragon? And I also want to say that I approve of the chat conversation here. We are talking about Naga means in Indian and Eastern mythology, Nagas are serpents, obviously. And somebody's saying, "Oh, I thought Naga was a Kraken." And somebody else said, "Well, Krakens don't have ribs," which they don't. They're like jellyfish, right?
Well, that's some
They have
interesting
cartilage.
Eve did nothing wrong stuff, you know?
What's that?
That's some interesting Eve did nothing wrong stuff. Like you've got a bunch of dead ribs surrounding a hill. That's like a bunch of sacrificed women.
Uh, what?
You know, Naga's ribs up on Naga's hill. It's very much, you know, Eve was Adam's rib, right? So there's like an
Oh, the
element of
right. Oh,
sacrifice there.
I hadn't thought about that rib reference in right. Okay, I will have to think about that a different time. That's
Yeah.
interesting. You're killing
No
me, Sean.
symbolism.
You're
No
absolutely killing me.
symbolism.
Okay, so look, yeah, my ADHD is bad today. I did not get enough sleep. So every time you change the subject, I just lose whatever I was trying to think. It's
All right.
not your fault.
I'll behave. I'll
I have a
behave.
sieve like short-term memory today. I had something I was gonna say. What was it? We were talking about Damon and Naga's ribs. Yes. Okay, so the ribs are weirwood, guys. The ribs is not this. I'm gonna make a video about. I mean, the video I recorded it. I'm working on it. But yeah, it's not a sea monster. There may. I don't know if there really are sea dragons. There may or may not be. I don't see why there wouldn't be. But that's not what's on Old Wick. Those aren't sea dragon ribs. They're not whale ribs. They're not any ribs. It's a weirwood boat hull flipped over, which is what the Vikings used to do to make long hulls. I will explain in the video. But yes.
Well, and it's very funny because if it's a king's moot, but those aren't dragon ribs, those are really, you know, dead trees, then it's really just a macabre ent moot, which is of
Oh, I didn't
course, you
think
know,
about the moot. Yeah, no, it's
where he got the
kind
word.
of.
Yeah.
They talk. You got to talk a little faster though than at the end moot. So, Alyn Oakenfist. So this is somebody that we see on House of the Dragon. He, after the war, becomes legitimized. Becomes Corlys's heir, and he takes over the Velaryon fleets. He is an admiral as well. You know, he's a ship's captain, becomes master of ships. He has 6 great voyages. So what's this? What are the Sinbad references? I'm not familiar.
So, you know, it's from Scheherazade, Arabian Nights. That's kind of where the Sinbad the sailor took off. And it's the 7 voyages of Sinbad. It was a staple of early Hollywood. They've made movies more recently around the millennium. There was a cartoon with Brad Pitt as Sinbad. It was like Ray Harryhausen made like 5 Sinbad movies. It was a big, it was its own genre really, and it was the last time that Hollywood was not Islamophobic. But basically, he's like kind of a Prince Admiral pirate, and he runs into like, you know, ogres and giants and dragons and fighting skeleton warriors and stuff. And on all these things that, you know, we can kind of just slot into a Song of Ice and Fire pretty damn easily.
I see.
So when they say the 7 voyages of Sinbad, who's, you know, Sinbad the sailor, and then we have the 9 voyages of Corlys, and then the 6 great voyages of Alyn Oakenfist, the way that they're referring to it is very much making that comparison. In the fact that they are both, you know, technically princes. They don't really call Corlys Velaryon a prince, but not even just by marriage, you know, just by the, you know, goofy incest and all of that of the Targaryens and Velaryons. These people are both literally princes. So they're kind of, you know, prince admirals. They're both masters of ships. So that's kind of an admiral position. but they're still sailing all across the world for their king. And Sinbad was always after like some magic MacGuffin of some kind. But yeah, it was it's a very similar idea. And it's Alyn Oakenfist is definitely kind of the junior version of this, but he's definitely still referencing the same thing, as well as obviously Thorin Oakenshield.
Though that was what I was waiting to ask you. What's the point of that obvious reference to a dwarf from Lord of the Rings?
Well, Thorin Oakenshield is a king under the mountain figure. His title is literally King Under the Mountain. So him coming back when his people need him to retake the mountain from the dragon, blah blah blah, and he of course he has Thor in his name, and he survived in some great fight against orcs by he lost his shield and he picked up an oaken branch, and basically it's like nature was his shield because he was the chosen summer king of the green. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff in Tolkien. He's a big fan of the whole King Under the Mountain archetype.
Okay.
Uses it repeatedly. So when we look at Alyn Oakenfist, who is, he's not a king, but he's an archetype of a king. He's a prince. He's, this royal sailor. And specifically, there's a naval battle where he gets the title of Oakenfist because he smashed open some galley with his, he hit it perpendicular, I guess, with his ship. And so it was like a great oaken fist. So it's like the, splitting the waters. It's kind of like analogous to the meteor coming down at the Stepstones. And he spends a lot of time at the Stepstones. And he's also the one who he's the real impetus behind Daeron the First conquering Dorne as well.
So I'm not seeing the correlation at all. Then I didn't.
So
it just sounds like he's loosely inspired by having a nickname that's Oaken something because of the way that oak was used in battle. That's about what I see.
So if you want to look at it like this, if you're a sea dragon, you are a dragon of the Green Sea, right? So he's a Velaryon sea dragon. He's got all this werewood dragon motif behind him. And so that is kind of, an of the green, of the oak, like the dragon that was chosen by nature, etc. And we're seeing a lot of similar things in Rhaegal, with Jon being a skin changer.
We can't like, I want to talk about pirates. I don't.
Okay. Yeah. It's too much of a tangent, but there is definitely.
So the correlation is through symbolism.
Through symbolism and nature. Yeah, basically. And you're not going to see that in the surface story.
Okay. Yeah, that seems real. I can't even. That seems very cryptic. Yeah, it seems more just like the thing I was like. He just likes the idea of like Oaken somebody that got his nickname from a battle. But yeah.
Well, I was also holding off more symbolism. There's you want to go with like Oakenshield and Oakenshield at the wall, and like there are some other things, like you basically get into the Capricorn stuff of sea goat type stuff going on, but it's way too big a tangent.
Okay, cool. Well, there it is. It is some kind of reference to the Hobbit, obviously, but I don't understand the Durin Durrandon one either. Like that's obviously a reference to another the Durin. All the dwarf kings are named Durin.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, aside from the fact that it's a reference to Duran Duran, the band,
right? But like, well, I don't understand how he's similar to Durin, the dwarf, other than he's a king that established a line. But they're not dwarves. I don't. So I don't know.
So I mean, this gets into how you interpret Norse mythology, because technically there aren't even really maybe dwarves. It's very likely that we kind of just interpreted them as dwarves because they were shorter and stockier than other elves. But the idea is that Svartalf and dwarf The names for them in Norse are kind of similar, and the idea is that at some point we basically just started treating dark elves like dwarves when there really is they're just a different type or breed or group of elves, and the lines are really blurred and it's really hard to figure out. But basically they're very magical, kind of like elves. Some of them have powers. They have kings of the dwarves, or dark elves, and they interact with the gods in a lot of ways, and sometimes in an antagonistic way, especially in the story of the Anvaronaut, which is where Tolkien got the ring
I
from.
wonder if it's the waking the Balrog thing. Like the part of the Dern God's Grief is challenging the gods, and it might be the same thing as summoning, the hammer or whatever.
So,
Whereas, because the whole idea of delving too deep is hubris, and then what
mhm.
happens? You wake the monster. That's kind of what Azor Ahai did, I guess.
Well, that's a huge thing in the Iron Islands, the Balrog. Like all of so many of the castles are named after things from Lord of the Rings. Like Hammerhorn Keep is a very clear
Right, yeah,
reference
that one
to,
down, yeah.
yeah. And like all of this, boom, doom, drums, and yeah. Anyway, there's again, it's way too big a tangent, but yeah, there's a lot of Balrog type stuff going on in the Iron Islands.
Well, we did do that Sigils of the Iron Island stream, Tim and I, who is finally in the chat, and I think we did come across some of that, yeah. So it is Aurane Waters time.
Oh yeah.
He, like I said, Cersei says he looks like Rhaegar with green eyes, and he's a pretty funny story because he essentially is created to highlight Cersei's incompetence, right?
Yeah, and her thirst. Like she made him master of ships on the power of I want to bang him.
Yeah,
But
that's right.
instead, she settled for like a kettle black and a mirror swamp, and she never got a hold of that dragon.
She did not, and he sailed off into the sunset with her ships, all of them. Basically, the crown spent all of this money making these nice ships, and he was like, "Thank you very much. I'm out of here."
Now I'm a
Now,
pirate king or lord or whatever. And it's funny because the title that he took, Lord of the Waters, is a lot like Lord of the Tides that the Velaryons get, and of course he's a non-legitimized Velaryon bastard, so it kind of makes sense. But yeah, it's also the kind of Poseidon figure in Tolkien's world is called Lord of the Waters, and he has a very active role in the Silmarillion. So it's
that seems obvious, but somehow that hadn't struck me that, like, yeah, Lord of the Waters is obviously his version of Lord of the Tides, and he is basically, if you were to interview him, he'd probably say, my great 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 grandfather Corlys, be like, there's no difference between what he's doing and what I'm doing,
yeah,
So
and my couple generations removed from that, Alyn Oakenfist was a bastard.
true, exactly, yeah. Like, what are we really talking about here? And thank you, Orange Tabby. I'm doing my best. Appreciate you. So yeah, it's just funny that he just buggered off with all these ships, and now, yeah, a new pirate king has set up on Torturous Deep, the Lord of the Waters. He styles himself. This one has real warships, 3-deckers, monstrous large. So that's the thing. It's like he's kind of like, yeah, they've got weapons that are just outclassing all of their enemies, all of their
Yeah.
neighbors and rivals. So he really is. Now it's going to depend on his experience, obviously, if he can hold on to that position. And eventually they might run into part of Fagon's fleet. We don't know. That may have happened already.
Well, I think he's working with Fagon. I think his name is the clue. Like Aurane is from AUR. That's the Latin prefix for gold. So his name is literally Gold Waters. So being the naval arm of the Golden Company would make a lot of sense for him.
Yeah, that's true. Some people have suggested he'll end up being Lord of the Tides, master of ships for Fagon. So, and
Yeah, I mean,
that would make sense because we've seen people do that. Like we were saying, they're going one side of the law and then the other side of the law, like Davos, and it's sort of going back and forth. Yeah.
Well, in to your point of you've talked a lot about Darkstar maybe becoming a Kingsguard member of Fagon's, where he's kind of a pale, pathetic version of Arthur Dayne, like a bad imitation of it, an inverse imitation of it. And he's, this pirate bastard here is kind of a pale imitation of, Corlys Velaryon or Alyn Oakenfist. So it would be very fitting if he were to end up as like master of ships to Fagon, just being like kind of a crappy version of what the real people have going.
Well, yeah, I just got a text message from my friend calling me out for not meeting your pirate costuming. I was wearing the hat earlier, and the thing is that this is a cheap hat, and it has this nasty plastic ridge on the inside. And so if I wear this for very long, I'll get a little red line across my forehead. I'll wear the hat, okay? We've only got another hour left. You know who you are. All right.
Bore out his brain over here.
I've been called out. I don't like being called out. I get defensive. So here I am. No, it's anyway. Go Vikings. Skål Vikings. Three sisters. So the three sisters. This is a short. This is a short section, right? This is only. It's not much to say, but the quote is interesting. So. This is Davos's inner monologue. Lord Godric's forebears had been pirate kings until the Starks came down on them with fire and sword. These days, the Sistermen left open piracy to Salladhor Saan and his ilk. These days, the Sistermen left open piracy to Salladhor Saan and his ilk and confined themselves to wrecking. However, wrecking, as like goes into that. The beacons that burned along the shores of the Three Sisters were supposed to warn of shoals and reefs and rocks and lead the way to safety, but on stormy nights and foggy ones, some sistermen would use false lights to draw unwary captains to their doom. Sean.
I don't know why you look at me. You're re-impugning my character here that I would, kill these captains. Like, because, just because I understand maritime salvage law does not mean that, I'm going to let these people wreck on my shores here.
I mean, beacons aren't reliable. Fires go out sometimes, so it's not our fault if. Anyway, yeah, so we see what's going on here. The Three Sisters, they have a history of piracy. So they, like people in the chat were saying, like, well, piracy, I mean, really is just stealing things, how you do it one way or the other. And so, yeah, they still might do that sometimes. Why don't you give us this little monologue from Lord Godric here?
All right.
What kind of voice you got for Lord Godric? Remember, his granddaughter has the mark, so I'm just saying.
Yeah, and they've all got like webbed fingers and feet, and Lord Godric began to eat his trencher, tearing it apart in his big hands. The stew had softened the stale bread. I have no love for Northmen, he announced. The maesters say the rape of the Three Sisters was 2,000 years ago, but Sisterton has not forgotten. We were a free people before that, with our kings ruling over us. Afterward, we had to bend our knees to the Eyrie to get the Northmen out. The wolf and the falcon fought over us for 1,000 years, till between the two of them, they had gnawed all the fat and flesh off the bones of these poor islands. As for your King Stannis, when he was Robert's master of ships, he sent a fleet into my port without my leave, and made me hang 12 fine friends. Men like you. He went so far as to threaten to hang me, if it should happen that some ship... Sorry, lost my spot. That some ship went aground because the night lamp had gone black. I had to eat his arrogance. He ate some of the trencher,
Now he comes north humbled, with his tail between his legs. Why should I give him any aid? Answer me that.
So this obviously is a great chapter, and we did this whole chapter. Well done, Sean. We did it without you, so the voices aren't quite as good. But we did do this chapter. It is on our chapter reread playlist. And yeah, the part of this, again, it's very textural. It captures the feel. They had to hang a dozen fine friends, men like yourself. So it's just kind of like, who are these? What kind of people are those? Like, that goes a lot of ways. Like, Davos was a pirate. He stole stuff and killed people and did all that. But he's also kind of an honorable man. And so, yeah, it's hard to say exactly what Godric means when he said, I had to hang a dozen fine friends. We're like, well, and then what does that tells you? Men like Davos, like pirates can stop in the Three Sisters and trade their stolen goods probably to Lord Burrell, and he'll be like, yeah, that's good. I don't need receipts on that. I don't need to know where you got that. Like his friends are pirates, I guess is my point.
Yeah. Well, and 12 of them, right? So the last hero is just a pirate on the Green Sea again.
Oh, Tim, okay, now hold on. I forgot that you did that with me, Tim. I was not trying to say that Sean's Godric Burrell voice was better than yours. I was assuming that I read it by myself, and my voices are never as good as Sean's. No, obviously I'm not meaning to, differentiate between my very talented voice actor friends, of which I have several. But yes, apparently Tim was on that stream.
By a mile, though.
Well, we need to get you guys together, Tim. This is what Sean was. Yeah, I know. I stepped in it. No, but Tim, Sean was disappointed that you couldn't make it for New Year's because he was looking forward to mixing it up with you, and he said as much on the stream. So I do need to get all the people and Nettles together, and we need to figure out like something really awesome to read.
And I'll be as dramatic as I possibly can be. And I was dramatic when I was whining about Tim not showing up and very catty about it. But yeah, I'd love to do some work with Tim.
Tim showed up to bust my balls in the chat. That's what he's here. He's done. Now he can go on about his Sunday.
Yeah, but he's just screwing around. But you got called out.
Well, I think that when we had Nettles it's just a matter of finding the right scene. Like when we gave Nettles the Lysa monologue, that was just, that killed.
Oh yeah.
And Borel's, he's got some great monologues. Maybe we need to do a stream where like we just grab all the best speeches and take turns like reeling them out. Maybe that would be a good stream.
Yeah. Unfortunately, my favorite speech, and I think it's half the people's favorite speech, it's just it's such a long monologue. It's the Septon Maribald. It's everybody's favorite, but it's...
Oh, Septon Maribald. Well, maybe there's Tyrion's trial really and Elia Sand, and there's the one of the Northmen talking about the Ned's little girl, and like there's some good ones. The Willa Manderly about the Wolf's Den.
The North Remembers speech. Yeah, that was really good. I did that chapter read on my Patreon.
Yeah, every once in a while, George gets his wind going, and he works up a little sermon there. So, yeah, maybe that would be a cool stream, like greatest speeches in Ice and Fire. You guys, let me know if you'd tune into that. If I
Hosted
got my fine friends,
Hosted by Nimble Dick.
Hosted by Nimble Dick himself, that's for sure. All right, a No Godless Man, right? Euron's No Godless Man. Yeah, there's the Mad Prophet, there's one in Game of Thrones, and then there's the Shepherd. There's two Mad Prophet speeches. Nice. Sean dropped the link to the Patreon, and I'll add it to me list. Minty came in talking some pirate talk a minute ago. I meant to read it, but I missed it.
Love it. Everybody get in character. Be dramatic.
Arrrgh. Yeah, like I said, my friend messaged me. He's like, "What? What's going on? Where's your flair?" Yar. Okie dokie. So, yeah, that's the Three Sisters. I talked about the Three Sisters quite. If you want more Three Sisters, check out The Deep Ones Are Real video. I laid into it there. I was very proud of what I figured out. So
They're
Dark
fishy
Star would
folk.
have the same. It's the same voice as Maynard Plum, only just a little more like pushy. Like Maynard Plum is above it all, and Dark Star is like kind of egging you on. But it's the same
he's
voice
upset.
with different emotion.
He's emo star. He's got an axe to grind.
Yeah, I do. I don't have 30 pieces of. I do. They're around. I've got some new stuff here. I've got this green. Oh man, this green jar here. This is new. It's got like plants on it and stuff. And I got a knife.
At what point do we start considering?
I got some flair.
Bongs as flair.
Yeah, I just don't have eye makeup. That's all. I can't. Sean went harder than me today. That's fine. And I don't, it's okay. I don't need to always have the spotlight. I've been wearing a purple football jersey and a Vikings hat. All right. Okay. So, let's see. Where were we? Salladhor Saan, Princes of the Narrow Sea, Salladhor Saan. So, tell us about his background a little bit.
So he actually, we think of him as just like a pirate, but the reality is he's from a prominent house in Lys, although that prominent house in Lys does seem to keep producing pirates. So he's very wealthy, he's flamboyant, he calls himself Prince of the Narrow Sea. But yeah, he comes from a line of pirates who have ruled different parts in the Narrow Sea, the Basilisk Isles, etc., Sargasso Saan, Samaro Saan. It's almost, a hereditary practice that, either like a second son or somebody from the family, goes off to kind of seek their fortune by just getting real piratey. And, it's not hard to come by ships in Lys. You get a couple ships, you steal a few more. All of a sudden, you're the Prince of the Narrow Sea.
So it's a little bit like the Three Sisters in that, like, there's a lord who's, like, very friendly with piracy. And, yeah, here we have this, Lyseni noble house that, like, just happens to turn up a lot of pirates and have all these connections to piracy for some reason, so.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Lys, Mir, and Tyrosh are sometimes called Three Sisters. And, of course,
Three daughters.
3 daughters. Yeah. So same thing, right? As if they're all daughters of the same person. They're 3 sisters. They are.
Somebody's sisters and daughters are all turning pirate. I'm not sure who that is, but.
Well, and they're constantly united in the triarchy at different points in history. So we see people fighting the triarchy and driving them out of the stepstones in the same way that we kind of drove the pirates of the 3 sisters out of, I don't know what that little sea is between the North and the Vale where the 3 Sisters is, but there.
And so we see, this quote from Stannis is interesting. Salladhor Saan thinks only of gold. His head is full of dreams. Actually, wait, do you have like a Stannis voice that I'm ruining and not letting you use? You do, don't you?
I could do Stannis. I've done Stannis before.
Salladhor Saan thinks only of gold. His head is full of dreams, of the treasure he fancies lies under the Red Keep. So let us hear no more of Salladhor Saan. The day I need military counsel from a Lysene brigand is the day I put off my crown and take the black.
So this highlights kind of the presence of basically the situation that Stannis is in. Like, he doesn't have much resources at all. And so he has to turn to some unorthodox means, like relorism, okay? Like this Azor High crap, like hiring a pirate, making a deal with a pirate. Because like Davos is this pirate who turned loyal, right, to Stannis, but Davos still has pirate connections. So Stannis is sitting around going, man, I wish I had a navy. And Davos at some point is like, well, I do have certain friends, fine friends in low places. I could send a few letters, and so somehow that happened.
Well,
Renly's
Stannis,
peach. Sean gets the Renly's peach speech after that, Grey Waste Tim says.
I'll just take the peach by itself. But yeah, Stannis is an outlaw to the crown, technically, with a large navy. So, in a certain manner of speaking, he is a pirate.
Well, he's a rebel, so yeah. And that's kind of like I said, it's just showing the road that Stannis is going down. He's trying to find, like, in some sense, he's the one who's like doing the job of king by protecting people, at least when he goes north to the wall, and he is technically the rightful king. But he's also, he's having to do some pretty unorthodox things to try to make his claim. And then this is Salladhor Saan speaking. What do you got for him?
Okay, can do kind of I like to go kind of a little bit almost Italian with these people from Lys and Tyraj.
Mm-hmm. Salladhor the beggar. That's what your king has made me. Salladhor the smashed. Where are my ships and my gold? And where is all the gold that I was promised? When? When? On the morrow? On the new moon? When the red comet comes again? He is promising me gold and gems, always promising. But this gold I have not seen. I have his word, he is saying. Oh yes, his royal word, he writes it down. Can Salladhor Saan eat the king's word? Can he quench his thirst with parchments and waxy seals? Can he tumble promises into a feather bed and love them till they squeal?
Yes. Well done. Well navigated. That's a great speech. And yeah, promises, IOUs, that's what Stannis is paying in. And
and the gold is, dragon gold, like the golden dragons. So he's trying to get dragons from Stannis because he's a Valyrian, just like his ship is named the Valyrian. So he's just another, Valyrian prince of the narrow sea here.
Yes, absolutely he is. And he wants to get him when the red comet comes again and the moon is new and all kinds of astronomy things are happening. But the interesting dynamic here is that because Stannis has made this deal with pirates, he is having to pay with promises. And so Stannis is complaining, he dreams that there's all this stuff in King's Landing to steal. But, like, that's what you're promising him. Like, he's a pirate. His payoff is going to be stealing stuff at some point. And so, he's like, you got to let me steal some stuff, right? Like, that's the deal. So, you can see there's an uneasy tension here. And I forget, what's happening with Salladhor last we hear? What is he doing now?
He's left.
Yeah. Where'd he go?
He brought them up north of the wall, and then he kind of decided that I don't think I'm going to recoup my investment from Stannis. So as far as we know, he went back down to the narrow sea. But at that point, now we have this Lord of the Waters. So, for my money, I think there's going to be blood in the waters. But I don't think we've heard much about what happened after he left Stannis.
That would be cool if he ran into Aurane and was like, who is this up-jumped youthful fool, and just like taught him a lesson. That'd be cool. We'll see. Yeah, so he's a pirate on the loose kind of then.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on in that narrow sea. There's Ironborn drifting around. And Euron's ulterior agenda was some of the Ironborn versus Victarion's Ironborn. And then we've got the Golden Company and Fagon ferrying people across all over the Stormlands and the coast. Then there's the Lord of the Waters, the regular Basilisk pirates, and Salladhor Saan just trying to get some return on investment any way he can. That's pretty gnarly. So you mentioned some of these other Saan pirates. Tell us about a couple of these other figures.
Okay, so we don't know too much about them. They're basically just mentioned in bylines in the A World of Ice and Fire. But when Aegon the Conqueror conquers the Seven Kingdoms, around that time, Sargoso Saan was a pirate lord of the Stepstones. Later on, Sathos Saan led a Lysine fleet to clear pirates out of the Basilisk Isles. But, once he'd done that, he decided that he would replace them as Pirate King in the Basilisk Isles. And he set himself up nicely there. Salladhor Saan was one of the 9 Penny Kings in the War of the Nine Penny Kings, or, as we look at it, the last Blackfire Rebellion. So he was kind of a very important figure there, because the other 9 Penny Kings, they weren't heads of state for the most part, but they were wealthy, powerful people who could field armies. So it's very much, it's a similar, these people are all doing very similar things to what Salladhor Saan is doing in the current story. Salladhor Saan was presumably like the naval arm in the War of the Nine Penny Kings, kind of like he's the naval arm for Stannis. Pirate Lord of the Stepstones. Salladhor Saan basically controls who goes through the Stepstones, before he becomes Stannis's army. So, it's just kind of like setting up the archetype for Salladhor Saan, where we get a lot more detail.
Right. Essentially, I think that's essentially what this is. It's just sort of weaving it into the historical, the recent history of that area. So Recalio Rendun, we get a little more about him. He's interesting. Recalio Rendun was mad, yet his men loved him, fought for him, died for him, and for a few short years, they made him a king. Says Archmaester Gildane. He declared himself king of the Narrow Sea. This was right after Daemon, right?
Yes. So he literally swooped in the second Daemon was gone. The Triarchy sent him in as like their second wave after Crabfeeder was defeated, and the Westerosi basically took hold of the Stepstones, and he was able to eat up that power vacuum immediately.
Eat it up like a raccoon. That Recalio Rendun. It's a fun name.
Crab
Rangoon. That's
Rangoon.
supposed to be Brigadoon or. So flamboyant and eccentric, a cross-dresser and a cuckold, which probably just sounds like a shamed account of some sort of open relationship lifestyle. It's cast in the most negative terms possible, but whatever.
He actually, when he met people that he liked or respected, he had them have sex with his wives to give him strong sons. So he did that to Alyn Oakenfist.
I see. Oh, right. Which they sort of used in the House of the Dragon plotline.
Yeah, they subbed in a Lannister, which made some amount of sense because there was a Lannister who was sent to treat with him during the Dance of the Dragons. We just
the Thailand treatment is based on this, Clover. That was the show version of the book story.
Yeah, so we're not going to deal with the fallout after the House of, or in what happens with the Stepstones after the Dance of the Dragons in the shows, and they really apparently wanted to include that. So,
and so let's see, tossed bones before battle to decide which gods to pray to. That kind of reminds me of Euron a little bit. As far as, all the gods and stuff, I'm the godliest man. I don't serve any one of them. And ruled from Bloodstone Island, like all of them do. And then there's Crabfeeder. We talked about Kragus Crabfeeder. A Prince Admiral of Myr. Excuse me. Don't call him a pirate. The crucifixion stuff was from the books, though. He really did that, staking people out on the beach. And, defeated the pirates of the Stepstones on behalf of the Triarchy. See, there's this cycle, right? So he defeats the pirates and then enacts exorbitant tolls, which causes Corlys to be like, you're a pirate. And then him and Daemon take over, and then they start charging tolls, and people accuse them of being pirates.
Yeah, well, and then that's what they sent Alyn Oakenfist to deal with. Unwin Peak was really just trying to get rid of Alyn Oakenfist, so he sent him to go deal with Dalton Greyjoy, and he's like, okay, well, if he's able to even get through Recalio Rendun, who might kill him, then he's going to go get killed by Dalton Greyjoy. I've gotten rid of him, essentially. But, he was apparently talking to the right one of Recalio Rendun's personalities, and so he was able to get through there just fine. But yeah, it's a cycle. They basically turned it back to closer to free trade with reasonable tolls with Recalio Rindoon, but Cragast Crabfeeder was the opposite version of that. Muted.
Thank you. I was just agreeing with you. I was just sort of seeing your point and going, that's all. It was that moment. So Davos Seaworth, he is a smuggler with a heart of gold. It is true. He is one of the good ones. Although he does think to himself that, he did cheat on his wife a little bit. But, so he's not perfect. But for the most part, he's a pretty good dude. And he does think of his wife very fondly. In fact, when he hears the Azor Ahai story, he thinks to himself, I couldn't stab my lovely Maria, I couldn't do that. I guess I'm not a hero. But of course, that's what makes him a hero, because you shouldn't do blood magic sacrifice things. Anyway, that's Davos. We know his moral compass points the right way. Tell us a little bit about his history, though.
Well, he was born in Flea Bottom. He kind of escaped when he found service under pirate captain Roro Uhoris. He became an infamous smuggler after Uhoris was executed, and he got a hold of his own ship. But he ended his career of smuggling after his greatest heist. He got a bunch of onions and salt fish into Storm's End through the red wine ships that were basically holding the siege from sea. And they survived long enough for Ned Stark to relieve the siege on land because of it. So Stannis raises him up to a knight, later a lord, cut off his fingers at the first joint everywhere, and now everybody calls him the Onion Knight.
So I have two problems with Davos' story. One, I'm not really a fan of onions. Like, they're okay when they're added into food. Like, you got to use them to make spaghetti sauce, like cooked onions mixed into stuff. Okay. I might go light onions. Not a big onion fan. I'm just not like, if we're starving hungry, how does like a bunch of raw onions help? Like,
well, if you're starving hungry, I guarantee they'll taste a lot better.
But how can you just eat an onion by itself?
I mean, I doubt they're worrying about garnishes here. These people are dying, but it
just seems like a weird food to smuggle in to people that are like, the fish makes a lot more sense. Like, that's,
yeah, but maybe it's just what they could get.
Like, what does an onion really give you? Like,
they're very nutritious.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
yeah, basically a superfood. Onions and garlic, amazing for you. Hard to eat on their own.
Gross. Yeah, so I hate that part of the story. Like, we're starving. I would just die. I'd be like, oh, great, you brought onions. I'm just going to go jump off the wall now. Like,
well, and you got to think about
onions,
it. Like,
they've
been eating rats, horses, and dogs. When the onions get there, they're like, okay, yeah, onions. We can do onions.
Anyway, and then the other part is the fingers. Like, bro, you were all gonna die. Homeboy shows up with onions and saves the day, okay? And then you're like, but I still have to cut off your fingers with a cleaver. Like, that's psycho. No, I wouldn't make it in a siege. Obviously not. Jesus.
No, but I do love the idea that Davos has such a
Jacaerys
hard
hitting me with like 17 onions emojis. That's awesome. I feel like I just got pelted.
Davos has such a hard choking fetish that he keeps those little fingers in a bag around his neck at all times.
It's weird. It's messed up, man. It has been percolating for a while. That's right. That was 4 decades of onion hatred. Yeah, light on the onions, man. Light on the onions. Uncooked onions are right out. Just anyway, I'll stop. But yeah, the fingers. It's like, dude, you saved a bunch of people. You don't have to cut his fingers off. You can probably like paddle him, or I don't know, come up with a fine, write him a ticket. Like the fingers, like it's a mutilation. That's a horrible, crippling mutilation. I think George was just being too hardcore when he came out. That's not a believable story to me.
Well, it gives you a good beat on why Stannis is not getting people around him, and Renly, who is the clear younger brother,
True.
is.
I would
one of
think
them's
twice.
Likeable, one of them's not.
I would think twice about pledging my loyalty to Stannis. If like, oh, that's your best friend. Okay.
Well, and what they're saying in the chat, maybe Stannis is like you and really hated the onions.
Maybe that's it. Stannis has my view on it. He's like, yeah, technically we didn't starve, but you brought us freaking onions. I'm cutting your fingers off.
This guy's been around the narrow sea. He couldn't bring me like oranges or something, like onions.
Give me some oranges. Now we're talking something
right.
Like, okay. I did have to get off that mic. That's like 14 years of I guess ever since I read that, I was just like, he smuggled onions to starving people. That's like, okay. Anyway, that was 10 minutes. We'll never get back. So, let's see here. I can smell the fear on you, Sir Knight, the red woman said softly.
Someone once told me the night is dark and full of terrors. And tonight, I'm no knight. Tonight, I'm Davos the smuggler again. Would that you were an onion.
She laughed. Is it me you fear, or what we do?
What you do. I'll have no part of it.
Your hand raised the sail. Your hand holds the tiller.
Silent, Davos tended to his course. The shore was a snarl of rocks, so he was taking them well out across the bay. He would wait for the tide to turn before coming about. Storm's End dwindled behind them, but the Red Woman seemed unconcerned.
Are you a good man, Davos Seaworth?
Would a good man be doing this?
I am a man, he said. I am kind to my wife, but I have known other women. I have tried to be a father to my sons, to help make them a place in this world. I have broken laws, but I never felt evil until tonight. I would say my parts are mixed, milady. Good and bad.
And then they go on to talk about what can you do if an onion is half rotten. At which point I'm like, throw it away. It's an onion. It's not
but
even
you were
good
saying
to
that the
begin
whole time.
with. We're trying to save half rotten onions? Like, toss it, man. Sorry.
Yeah, but she's got firepower, man. She can cook the onion.
No, you could cut it in half and save the, I guess. Yeah, no. Don't do that with bread or cheese, though. Well, cheese, actually, no. Cheese, if there's only a little mold on the outside, you could cut. What I do is I cut a layer off every side of the block so that there's no air contamination. And if you go like half an inch down and get that core, you can save that. But with the bread, if there's anything, you want to throw the whole thing out. Onions, I don't know. Like I said, that's just toss it. All right. Anyways, so this is an interesting quote. Obviously, there's accountability and responsibility being debated here. It's like, okay, well, you serve Stannis, and Stannis is having you do this mission, so I can do this, so you're part of it. It's just a bunch of morality, shadow play stuff. Not that much to do with piracy, except for that. Well, their conversation doesn't, but what he's doing does. So he says, "I'm Davos the smuggler again," and so this is one of those examples of Stannis, a lord or a king, using his smuggler to essentially do something pretty questionable, to smuggle an assassin inside of a castle. So it's blurring the lines like kind of all of our pirates do.
State-sanctioned piracy.
It is indeed. And then we've got more of that. Actually, no, Davos is not really... He's smuggling an assassin here. When he's going on the mission to White Harbor and all the rest, that's pretty much like he's an ambassador of Stannis at that point. He's using some of his contacts, like with Lord Borrell, to not die, but that's what you do if you're a politician or an ambassador or anything like that. Like, you use whatever contacts you have, so...
Although, I will make the distinction that he's basically turning into a pirate again when he goes to, you know, on Manderley's behalf to get Rickon.
Lord knows what he's going to have to do to succeed in that mission. We'll have to see. But he'll probably have to negotiate with the Skygosi. I don't think he's going to do, like, pirate raiding. But we'll see. We will see. We did, of course, check out our Rickon stream that I did with Tim. We did some predictions about how that's going to go. We took that way further than I thought we would, too. So that was pretty sick.
Hint, cannibalism.
A lot of cannibalism.
Rather eat people than onions.
Give me the green eggs and hams. I'll take... Yeah. If we're doing like a breakfast scramble, we could throw some onions in there. Like I said, spaghetti sauce. They have to be cooked, and we only need about half as many as however many you wanted to put in. That's all I have to
little
say.
long pig bacon.
What's that?
A little bit of long pig bacon.
You want a little onion with that too, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
No, if someone's cooking, I'll just walk by and look at the pile of chopped onions and be like, "You gonna use all those? How about like half that much?" Start negotiating. All right. Belagir, the Black Pearl Otharies. Sean?
No symbolism.
No.
No. Yeah, we're nipping this in the bud, which is also not symbolism. All right.
Otharies it's a reference to Othello, probably. She's from a powerful Bravosi house. Her grandfather was a sea lord. And so what is her exact lineage? Her mother was a Summer Islander princess, and she had an affair that princess did with Aegon the Unworthy, of course. That lasted a decade.
That is Belagir who had the affair. So if we're looking at exact lineage, there was a Sea Lord of Bravos of House Otharis. He had a son, and that son married a Summer Islander princess.
Okay.
And from that union, we got Belagir and her siblings.
And then Belagir had an affair with Aegon IV, but really she was a mistress, not an affair. It was an ongoing thing. 3 children, Bellanora, Nara, and Balerion. That's cool. But the paternity of all of them is doubtful, as she was said to have a husband in every port. Okay, right on. She became a pirate queen using the title the Black Pearl. So what can you tell us about that?
Well, it's interesting because the title ended up getting passed on, but her descendants were not pirates. So her descendants became courtesans, who went by the title of the Black Pearl, and they were very important. Like, these are not your run-of-the-mill, Lycene pleasure house people. First off, they're in Bravos. They've come back to Bravos. So as much as, she was a pirate, it is somehow okay for her, children and descendants to set up shop in Bravos. But let's make a quick distinction between a courtesan and, your run-of-the-mill sex worker. She's getting carried around into Palanquin. She is the current Black Pearl in the story buys, from Arya when she is Cat of the Canals. So that's where we meet it in the current story.
Right. And in the chat, they've translated Belagir as Belle-Guerre, which means pretty war in French. That kind of makes sense for a pirate queen, doesn't it?
Right.
That's cool. And the Black Pearl, obviously, there's Dark Moon symbolism, Night's Queen, father of, mother of the others, Belagir, Otharies, whatever. I mean, you guys fill in the blanks. That's all. It's out there, whatever. But
that's
cool that she's a
real
pirate
thing.
queen. And because the courtesan tradition is very powerful. Like those courtesans are politically powerful and they're wealthy. So these are interesting. We see that outside of Westeros, women can forge. They just have more options as far as like achieving glory and fame in the free cities seem like an interesting environment for that, don't they?
Yeah, well, most of the free cities are Valyrian settlements. Bravos obviously is not. It was settled by former Valyrian slaves, but like
Valyria was
three
more
daughters,
gender equal, weren't they? I guess, huh?
they were
From a
women could
supremacist,
inherit.
like, yeah.
Right, women could inherit if they were the oldest. So technically, when we go back to the original Aegon the Conqueror, he had an elder sister. She was supposed to inherit, but when they kind of became Westerosi, Aegon kind of became the leader of the three. Plus, we all think that he had some green dream type, dragon dream type stuff going on. But anyway, not to get too off topic, despite the fact that one of these kids was named Balerion. The idea is
Daisy Sandusky in the chat has translated Belagir differently. I'm not sure what translation. She says it means delicious onion. I don't think that's suspect to me. I don't think that's
not in French.
No,
my French is a little rusty, but I know the roots pretty well.
Yeah, I don't think that checks out. That's suspect.
Yeah, guerre means war, and it's out of French. It's from Older Germanic to
also onions aren't tasty,
spear.
So that wouldn't make sense.
Spear
it's an oxymoron.
So it can mean pretty spear as well.
Somebody's like oignon delicieux. Thank you. All right. Oh, what did I just say? No, I'm kidding. Okay, so then we've got the descendant, right? Arya meets her descendant in Bravo. So that is a cool backstory. Most of that is really for symbolism, yes, but it's also just showing the interesting way that people from different parts of the world weave their stories together. So somebody from the Summer Islanders and people from Bravos and a Targaryen king. And then we've got this line of courtesans, and one of them was a pirate queen. Like, this is just color, if you will. It's very colorful color. It's pretty cool.
Well,
so.
And black pearls are a real thing, in case that wasn't, in case not everybody knew that. What a pearl is when a clam gets a grain of sand or something that's not supposed to be in, I don't want to say mouth because it's not their mouth, but they basically, cover it slowly, with whatever enzyme, and eventually they make a gigantic pearl out of it by depositing over a long period of time around it. And there is a variety of clam that can do that and make a black pearl.
Well, you know what pearls and onions have in common is that they're both moon symbols. So.
And definitely in Davos' sigil, the onion is a moon.
Yeah, pearl is oyster spit, and onions make me want to spit. Puh.
Yeah, it all comes full circle. Oh my God!
I'm losing subscribers. I got squishers in here saying they're unsubscribing. Sorry, you had to see this dark side of me. You think you know somebody parasocially, and then I pull this,
And then all of a sudden, this onion xenophobia.
Onion phobia, yeah. All right, so let's see. Alyssa Farman, she's sort of an honorable mention here. She's kind of a pirate because she stole some stuff to get started. She stole the dragon's eggs and sold them and then built ships. So she basically stole the ships. And then what she's doing is in the spirit of like some of these privateers. She's exploring like Corlys. She's receiving funding from a state and she's kind of doing things illegally and putting together a team, people that are throwing down and investing on this mission. So yeah, it's kind of it's pirate adjacent.
And she's very much pursued by Westeros after stealing the 3 eggs. So she's, as an enemy of the state, it's definitely very piratey.
I'd say that counts, yeah. And again, the vibes check out. So She was a close companion of Rhaena Targaryen, which means yes, they were girlfriends. And
And they had two other girlfriends.
there's a whole story like Rhaena and Alyssa. There's a whole story there with Andrew Farman. We're gonna do a Rhaena Targaryen stream. I think I've promised that to another friend of mine for a couple years now. She's a huge Rhaena fan, and I got to get on that. I'm sorry. I will do that. And yeah, she couldn't stand life on Dragonstone anymore with Rhaena. She was kind of in her shadow, I think, and had her own thing she wanted to do. And so, yeah, she took the name Alice Westhill, made her way to Bravos, stole those Targaryen eggs from Dragonstone, which is crazy. I mean, that's ballsy as hell. And then, yeah, they built Sunchaser. And you're referring to Skull, the wolf from Norse myth.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just mythical astronomy stuff. We can't. Welcome. She went to Old Town. She convinced Eustace Hightower and Norman Hightower to join her, which is kind of crazy when she's an outlaw and she stopped by Old Town and grabbed a couple of Hightower sons to go with her. I guess she needed money, right?
Yeah. And she wanted, them to bring more ships. So they had kind of a 3-ship thing going on: Nina, Pinta, Santa Maria. And one of the ships was Lady Meredith. Meredith, Mary, Santa Maria. Maria is just Spanish for Mary. So we're definitely playing up the same idea here. It's funny that one of the sons of Old Town here was Eustace, because Eustace in Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis is the cousin who gets brought along on the sea voyage.
Totally. Thank you for reminding me about that. Yeah.
Also, when she adopts the alias Alice Westhill, that's also a Tolkien reference, because when Frodo goes on his journey, he goes under the name Mr. Underhill.
Underhill, right.
Right. So, and that's like, it's kind of like a, in miniature, King Under the Mountain idea going on there. But yeah, this is the, West version, because if you are a bastard in the West, your name is Hill, right? So
yes.
It's kind of like a takeoff on that, and the same reason that Tyrion goes by Hugor Hill when he takes his alias. So they're doing a lot of similar things here, and of course Tyrion is also going on a sea voyage when he does that. So,
and of course the whole story of Alyssa Farman is cool. They find those 3 islands that are the furthest west anyone's been. And two of the, one of the ships is foundering, and they have to, save some of the people on it. And do they save some of the people, or does everyone on that ship go down?
I think one of the ships went down, and then one of the ships tried to get back to Old Town, and got way off track, and a whole
got to the Summer Isles in Sothorios or somewhere. Yeah, totally had to be rescued. Yeah.
Very Odysseus coded. Yeah, it was a rough time for all of them. But
and check out Atlas of Ice and Fire WordPress. They've got a map of Alyssa Farman's journeys and stuff that's pretty cool to look at. And then, of course, the end of her story, we think that she made it to Ashai because years later, Corlys Velaryon, the sea snake, swears that he saw a ship that could only be Sunchaser docked in Ashai when he got there. And so, yeah, and you put in that he would know, being a huge fan of Alyssa Farman and Sunchaser, who studied its blueprints. Are you just speculating there?
No, that was in it. He did study the blueprints of the Sunchaser. He implemented a lot of those things on his ship, the Sea Snake. He was a huge fan of Alyssa Farman. She was a hero of his.
Cool. Well, there you go. That kind of locks it up. I somehow forgot about that detail. I've always thought that it was the case that she did make it. And check out our Quaid stream. Obviously, Alyssa Farman might be Quaid. That's a strong possibility. So I did a Quaid live stream a few months ago, and we tackled the 3 main, people that she might be: Shara Seastar, Alyssa Farman, or Ashara Dane. And we talked about all those and what they could mean. So yeah, check that out if you want more Alyssa Farman talk. And that's it. We're done. See you later. Thanks, Sean. You've been lovely. Oh, I am hungry, and not for onions. I'm going to get a hamburger with no onions. None. I
Oh my
always order
God.
no onions every time. First thing I do when I order anything is say no onions. They're like, it doesn't have onions. And I was like, just making sure. And they're like, settle down, sir. You don't need to have your weapon out. And I'm like, I'm sorry. You know, that's
It's just made of foam. It's Foam Keeper. I don't have my real one yet.
But don't put any onions in. Okay. No, I like I said, it's mixed in salsa. That's okay. If it's in spaghetti sauce, that's okay. Look at that. There's some potatoes and carrots in there. I like potatoes and carrots. Yeah, you have to if they're cooked and they're mixed with food, but I still only want half of however many that you want. That's the thing. I don't really want to taste them directly. I understand that they add flavor. Okay, that's enough. I've already lost whatever subs I'm going to lose.
Watching the subs crater.
Just crater. The chat interaction is going up and the subs are going down. How's that happening?
Oh, look at that onion meteor just leaving a giant crater.
Well, the Davos' sigil puts the onion up in the sky in the black field. It's like, oh, is that a moon? Probably so. Yeah, so he's smuggling moon meteors.
Yeah. Well, and for the guy who talks that much about constellations, it's really only him and John who talk about constellations constantly.
It is. You're right. It is. It's John and Davos. They're the astronomers. I like this 1,000 voice guy. What's his name? Hero with 1,000 voices. The link to his channel is in the description right below the video, highlighted in blue. Just click on his name. My mods will drop his link in the chat right now, and he's a good guy. His name is Sean. He does good voices, and he making some streams better around here lately, so that's cool. Yeah, I'm not reading any comments on this video, Orange Tabby. Not a one.
Oh, man, the onion propaganda from the Citadel is already at work, clearly.
Hey, I'm not trying to take them out of anybody else's hands. You can eat as many onions as you want. I'm just saying, if I'm starving in a castle and you bring me onions, I'm going to look at you like,
oh, I'm
really?
good. Like my dad hates onions. So he told me I wouldn't like onions. And like we never cooked with onions growing up. And so when I was an adult, I found out I actually really like onions, and now I throw that shit in everything.
Well, there you go. There you go. The short video will just be, no, I will not survive a siege. Yeah, we've established that.
And I hope they burn in hell.
I would just jump off the castle wall. All right. Well, love you guys. Thanks for joining me. Like I said, look out for my air. No, I don't like onion rings. That's gross. That's disgusting, John Haymaker. I can't believe you would say that to me.
If you want to see more pirate stuff, I just put up a video about pirates and Treasure Island on my Patreon. I sing a couple of pirate shanties on it. It's a good time.
They want me to eat an onion when the Winds of Winter comes out. Look, if it helped, I don't know. I probably still wouldn't do that shit. That's gross.
How about an onion for A Dream of Spring?
If George, I don't see how that equates. They're really just, one has nothing to do with the other. So I don't think I've got to make that choice. In any case, I do love y'all. And let's see, what was I going to say? Yeah, so watch out for the Euron got patch-faced, condensed, and artified video this week. If you click on that, that'd be cool. And I am working on the Naga's Bones video, which is going to be like 50 minutes of awesome in about 2 weeks. So go Vikings.
Looking forward to it. But yeah, I mean, you have to realize that at this point, onions are going to become a thing. There's going to be an onion emoji. It's going to be all over the Discord.
Orange Tabby, I don't know if you have my business address. That might be my home address. So if you have it, and I don't remember who I've given it to you, do not give it out so that people can send me onions. That would not be cool. That would be a waste of onions. You should give them to people who like onions.
Oh my God.
You know what I like? Bell peppers. Love some bell peppers.
James Maynard Plum is about to just get buried under onions.
That's what it is. It's like his P.O. box or something. Yeah, that's probably what Orange Tabby has. It'd be Maynard's P.O. box. Yeah, how many onions can we fit in Maynard James Plum's P.O. box? We'll find out. And of course, yeah, no, bell peppers are great. I do throw bell peppers in a lot of things. So, any case, all right, that's enough. I don't know what we did today. I think we talked about pirates.
It was adjacent, yeah.
Adjacent. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate you. And next week, I always do this. I'm not going to say. I'm not sure exactly. It'll be at 1 o'clock, though, for sure. Definitely 1 o'clock. All right, guys.
Yeah. Well, looking forward to Naga. Looking forward to the vampire stream.
That will be later in the month. Yeah, with Tim. Tim is... There'll be no containing him on that stream, that's for sure. It's going to be monster mash.
I'm waiting for the costume, for sure, yeah.
We'll probably end up going through a bunch of different monsters and talking about them. Because, even though we've talked about the Starks forever, looking at them as werewolves would probably bring some different analysis, so...
Oh, yeah. And there's a Frankenstein and Gregor. There's all the classic horror monsters and tropes are in here.
For sure.
Including mummies.
Yeah, Tim's halfway through Fever Dream. I need to read that too. So, all right, guys. I'll see ya. Thanks. Cheers.